Hello everyone. Welcome to the stream for today. Today we are doing our Perils in Paradise card review. We're gonna be doing the full set today. I haven't really done any kind of card review stuff. I've been busy traveling, busy doing the Commander Home shoot this past weekend, busy doing a bunch of stuff. But now it's game time or vacation time, I guess. We got this cool hat or whatever style thing from Blizzard, and it's obviously very appropriate for Perils in Paradise from their thing, and we're gonna wear it for the review. We're gonna try to do this review pretty efficiently. Olivia and I are actually guesting on Dr. Lupo's charity stream today, and that starts in just a few hours. So I'm going to try and get through the card review as quickly as I can, so we don't overlap that time period. I actually only realized I thought that our time slot was at 4 p.m. our time, but it's 4 p.m. Eastern time. So we got about 3 hours, and I've definitely taken much longer than that for full card reviews in the past. So we're gonna hop right to it. Usually I'd give people a little more time to sort of trickle in before starting the review after starting the stream. But we don't have that luxury right now. So we are, well, first I'm going to close a bunch of windows. I don't even know what this window is, and I'm trying to close it, and it's just misbehaving. But yeah, let me close basically everything I don't need right now, so I don't have random things. Boop, boop. Boop, a boop. Getting in the way of what we're trying to do around here. But yeah, definitely there's a lot of really cool things in this set. I'm gonna, obviously talk about that more in the individual sort of section stuff. Do 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 do. So, but yeah, Perils in Paradise, very cool. Let's get to it. Hey, Jarvis with the 10 gift subs. Jarvis, spoiler alert, was one of the guests this past weekend when we filmed Commander at Home. I do not have my notifications on this window because this is the review window, but I did see that over here. So thank you very much, Jarvis. Great to hang out and play some games with you, and we'll have to do it again sometime soon. All right. Like I said, I'm gonna get started. So let's do it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Perils in Paradise full set review. We're going to be doing class by class as always, but I haven't really dove into doing reviews of any of the cards so far. I've just kind of been busy with a lot of stuff going on. So we're just going to do it all at once. This is my typical sort of format for my reviews, is going class by class, card by card, and talking about them individually all at once they've all been reviewed, or rather been revealed. I am in a position where I actually haven't looked at that many of the reveals because I have been so busy. So we're going to be seeing some of these cards for the first time as I'm taking a look. I do want to give kind of a general thought on some of the mechanics in Perils in Paradise to begin with. The big one, I think, being the tourist mechanic. The tourist mechanic is that there are individual legendary cards in each of the classes that allow you to include a card from another specific class in deck building. And that is probably one of my favorite mechanics that we've seen in Hearthstone in a very long time. I've talked about this quite a bit when people ask me for my thoughts, sort of comparing Hearthstone and Magic, and they ask me, what are your thoughts on each of them? And the singular thing that I enjoy the most about Magic compared to Hearthstone is deck building. I think that the deck building process in Magic the Gathering is much more interesting than that of Hearthstone because of the just options you have, right? In Hearthstone, you play a class, and those are the cards you can play. Those are neutral cards, and that's it, right? There's no like, hey, I can play any individual card with any individual other card in Magic, which I think opens up a lot of really, really fascinating possible deck building combinations. And there's opportunity costs with the way that mana works in Magic, and that has its pros and cons, obviously. But it just gives you more sort of things to dream about doing, right? And the tourist mechanic in Perils in Paradise gives you some of that, right? Having a a druid card with warrior tourist can let you play Odin in your druid deck, right? And that's wildly interesting in terms of like what that looks like from, hey, from a deck building perspective, like what is it like when you can ramp into Odin? What is it like if you have all these ultra efficient armor gain cards in druid that you can combine with this powerful way to actually use them to end the game. So I think it is fascinating as a mechanic, and I'm really interested in exploring it. It's obviously not nearly as open ended as the deck building mechanics of Magic the Gathering, but it is sort of one step in that direction that creates really, really interesting deck building possibilities, and that is one of my favorite things about collectible card games, and a huge part of the reason I play. So super, super excited. Oh, people in chat right now are saying it's limited to the current set? What? It's so much less interesting. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's literally just, let me look it up, because I thought it was just any card. Hearthstone mechanic. Is it literally just a Perils in Paradise card? It is only a Perils in Paradise card. Oh. Well, that's so much less exciting. Huh. I mean, I get from a development standpoint why you might do that, because it gives you less constraints of like, hey, what happens if you do put this card from another class in your deck or whatever. But yeah, and it's also it was backwards in terms of what had Druid Tourist versus Warrior Tourist. They're flipped. The Warrior has the Druid Tourist. But yeah, I'm so much less excited now. But it is still exciting. There's still cool, flexible stuff. But it's basically like you just get to kind of pick a few cards in that expansion that are basically dual class cards, which is much less cool. So I kind of wish it was the other way, but I understand why it might be that way. But meh. Meh. Talk about taking the wind out of my sails. It's like I was like, kite surfing and then just anyway, I'm glad I know that now and not as I'm talking about each individual card and getting it all wrong all the time. But now I guess we all know how Taurus works. Thank you, Twitch chat. So yeah, you can use a Taurus card to get a card from that set, specifically from Perils in Paradise. So yeah, and you can't use a Taurus card to get another Taurus card, which makes sense. But yeah, huh? That is less exciting than I initially thought, but it is still much more open-ended deck building wise than Hearthstone has been previously. So there's still that. Anyway, let's actually get into the cards. So we are starting with boom, Death Knight. One of the major mechanics here, or rather major themes of this set, is pirates. This is an undead pirate. The pirates, I guess, are Marin's band that went and opened the resort, Perils in Paradise. I guess I do want to say another comment about like I think it's a little bit weird that we've just seen kind of these like wacky like happy kind of expansions like back to back like so much in Hearthstone recently. I would prefer we have more of sort of the March of the Lich King, more like serious-ish stuff at least, rather than just like here we're going on vacation, we go into the toy shop. Like it just feels a little I don't know, less like Warcraft to me. And I guess there is some intention of sort of moving Hearthstone from being Heroes of Warcraft to its kind of own thing, but it does feel a little goofy to me that we have so many just like very, very light themed expansions. But regardless, Brittlebone Buccaneer, 2 costs 1/4. Whenever you play a Death Rattle minion, give it Reborn. So this is a pretty difficult minion to kill. At 2 costs 1/4, we've seen that stat line a number of times on minions that you want to play and have stick around. This is a very powerful effect with lots and lots of various Death Rattle minions. This with say the I'm losing the name of it, but the death rattle minion that gives your undead +2/+2 in your hand. It has miniaturize. The like that in a deck with this. This is undead synergizes automatically. This being, alongside like really like any death rattle minion, right? Like you can use this in the sort of early game to get like tempo from, like minions that have death rattles that generate additional minions. In the late game from things that have, ways to generate like value or huge board presence. Again, like the death rattle uh, puppeteer thing, Reska. Obviously, you can use this alongside things um, like the Yelling Yodeler. There's just so many things that I think this is actually quite a powerful card that it can synergize with. So I do think this card has quite a bit of potential. It being specifically in Undead makes a lot of sense. That's the rune that certainly lends itself most to Death Rattle minions. So this is a card that I definitely think will see a meaningful amount of play. Next up, Buttons. 5 cost 5/5 with Shaman Tourist. Battlecry, draw a spell of each spell school. So now that we know that Taurus only allows you to use cards from the particular expansion, one of the Shaman mechanics in this expansion is sort of related to spell schools and stuff, so this does make sense. But one of the interesting things, normally this effect in Death Knight would get like basically like Frost, Unholy, and adding Shaman, and you can get like maybe you add a nature spell to your deck with the Tourist effect. So this I think that the ability to get like some sort of powerful spell that you can basically guarantee you're drawing with buttons is an interesting sort of element of the Tourist effect here. You could potentially get another of the individual powerful non-spell cards in Shaman, but again, now that we know how the mechanic works, and you can't just go ahead and get like say a Shaman hero card or something if one is printed in the future, certainly makes it more likely that you're specifically going to aim to use this with the specific spell school synergy and get things that exist in Shaman that don't exist in Death Knight. Next up, we have Eliza Goreblade, a 4 cost 4/3 with Death Rattle for the rest of the game. Your minions have +1 attack. This card is weird, right? Because this card being specifically Frost Blood, like I get that you're like, hey, this effect maybe is too powerful in a like heavy unholy deck, but it also feels like such an unholy mechanic, right? That it's weird that this isn't an unholy card. This card feels so similar to wanting to be unholy, right? That it's strange that the card doesn't have it. And again, from like a like balance perspective standpoint, it's like, okay, I guess. But it is only two pips, right? Blood plus Frost. You could use it with that first card that we saw. This dude, the Brittlebone Buccaneer. Give your Eliza Goreblade Reborn things that can multiple trigger it. Notably, this isn't like the like minions you control, minions in your hand, minions in your deck. This affects your hero power, right? So the fact that you can like if you multi-trigger this, you're like sending 2, 3, 4 power charged minions with your hero power is quite strong. So yeah. Again, it feels strange to me that this is a Blood Frost card rather than being an Unholy card just because of its effect. But like from a like balance perspective, I get how they might want to avoid it being available with the double Unholy, triple Unholy cards. It is a little weird to me that we have seen so much push away from any kind of triple rune decks, and so much is just kind of an amalgamation of like rainbow decks now, rather than rainbow being like, hey, you have to give up on these other powerful cards, but we just sort of see everything with single runes, which I think kind of loses some of the point of the rune system in the first place. I do think there was sort of initially when when Death Knight came out, the rune system pushed people too much toward triple, and now I think it pushes them too much toward rainbow. And I wish we'd see, like this, if this were like a triple unholy card, that could be interesting, right? But maybe that ends up being like too straightforwardly powerful with the sort of unholy synergies. But it just does feel like an unholy card to me, and it's strange that it's not. Next up, Corpsicle. 2 cost Frost spell with a Frost rune. Deal 3 damage. Spend three corpses to return to your hand at the end of the turn. So this is very like Frozen Touch, with rather than you have the it gets the whatever effect. I'm forgetting what that was called. When things died while it was in your hand, but this you can obviously bank it. It's not like that effect where you'd have to have it in your hand. This, like, if you have 30 corpses banked, you can just corpse sickle every single turn. So this is an interesting payoff for having corpses in a frost-ish deck. It's like a kind of a repeatable burn spell. It's not something you can use like Frozen Touch in terms of like being able to multicast it in a single turn to burn your opponent out. Much more flexible than the infuse cost, because again, you can sort of stack the corpses whenever rather than having to have this in your hand. But it is kind of like a, for old school Magic players, it's like a Hammer of Bogarden, right? Like it's a just repeatable burn spell. You can potentially use it every single turn. This, I think, probably pales in comparison in terms of the payoff you're getting for your corpses compared to the whatever the foam axe thing that you just keep getting durability every time you expend corpses with it. But it's another sort of way that you just directly can turn corpses into damage in that style of deck that can give you just repeated damage over the long term. So this certainly feels like it can be a very, very reasonable removal / long game damage spell sort of effect. Next up, we have Horizon's Edge. 4-cost location with 5 durability. It's weird that this particular image is so much bigger and coming off the screen, but deal 3 damage randomly split among all enemies. After a friendly minion dies, reopen this. So this is one of the mechanics in the new set, which is ways to reopen your locations. So, this being effectively like arcane missiles, right? But you can keep using the arcane missiles effect every time a friendly minion dies. This has no rune requirement either. So this is 15 damage on a card for 4 mana. So if you're playing this in, say, like an unholy deck with a bunch of small minions, maybe you're playing it alongside like crop rotation, things like that, this can just nuke your opponent, right? Like, this is a very, very powerful card to blow your opponent up, as long as you have like a bunch of small minions that you can get killed repeatedly. So this feels like a very, very powerful like finisher style card for a deck that's not just generating a lot of corpses, but generating a lot of like bodies on the board that it's able to trade off and get killed. And you use those minions, trade off, and get them killed by killing your opponent's minions, and then all this damage goes face. So this feels like a really, really strong card to me. And I wouldn't even be surprised if this like ends up getting toned down at some point with maybe a little bit less durability. Next up, we have Frostbitten Freebooter. With 3-cost 2/2 Undead Pirate, 1 Frost Rune. With Death Metal, freeze 3 random enemies. Any that were already frozen take 5 damage instead. So this is an interesting card in combination with like the freeze lifesteal weapon. That feels like a very, very powerful way to like just get a bunch of damage on your opponent with this. If there's other like sort of freeze effects, like Might of Menethil, that's going to kill your opponent's minions. But this is obviously very good at killing your opponent's face if you freeze their face. There aren't really that many freeze your opponent's face things in Death Knight. They're much more about freezing opponent's minions. There's like the weapon and like Glacial Shard that I can think of that can easily freeze your opponent's face and potentially just get 5 damage off this guy's death rattle for it. But 5 damage plus this body plus potentially freezing their minions for 3 mana does feel like it has some potential there. Next up, we have Snow Shredder, another freeze-focused synergy card. 4-cost 4/4, costs 1 if a character is frozen. So this does feel like it has some potential with the other things that are obviously caring about freeze synergies. No, it has potential. Oko has the potential. Just coming up to say hi. Hi, bud. So yeah, clearly some push toward building a like freeze Death Knight deck here. Between that sort of previous card and this one, could certainly see like a tempo freeze sort of burn style of deck going on with these. Next up, Ghoul's Knight, a 4-cost spell. Summon 5 1/1 ghouls that attack random enemies. So notably, this is not like a crop rotation effect. They don't go away. But this alongside the, like, say, Arcane Missiles location here, the Horizon's Edge, definitely feels like the sort of thing that can do a lot of damage, right? Like if your opponent has minions, this can, get, like, kill some of their minions. Could also just be like 5 damage face for 4 if they have nothing in play, right? And then you still have a bunch of 1/1s. If you want corpses, a lot of corpse generation. So this just feels like a powerful card. It can be like basically opponent has an empty board, it fireballs them, right? It does 4 damage, or 5 damage rather, for 4 mana, and leaves you with a bunch of bodies they have to deal with. And those give you corpses, those can trigger things. So this feels like a powerful card that has a lot of potential in a number of different decks. Next up, we have Dreadhound Handler. 2-cost 2/2 Rush. Undead Pirate, both for potentially relevant minion types. With Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Dreadhound with Reborn. So if you're playing a deck that's looking for any kind of corpse generation, this is a 2-cost minion that can immediately remove an opponent's minion with Rush, and then give you another body that generates another body. So this is a very reasonable board control effect, as well as a very powerful corpse generator. So this just definitely feels like a very solid card that has the potential to fit into a number of different decks as long as they care about, undead. I assume the Dreadhound is undead as well. If they care about, board control / corpses. So just generally seems like a very solid role player style card. Next we have Slippery Slope, a double frost spell. Freeze a character, draw a card for each frozen character. So this, is clearly another card that has the potential alongside the, the frozen style things we were talking about. Again, I don't know that there's enough real payoffs for, hey, do a bunch of stuff to frozen stuff. Because there really wasn't very much before that cared about stuff being frozen. Now there's like 3 cards in this set that do care about frozen things. This one, if you use this with like Might of Menethil, right? This alongside Might of Menethil has the potential to, draw you a bunch of cards and freeze your opponent's face, and then maybe, enable your 2/2 that death rattles to deal 5 to the frozen things. But yeah, there's definitely some potential here. This feels like the best of the payoffs. Like a 2-cost potential draw 3, 4 that already has an additional effect. Does seem pretty solid to me. So overall, Death Knight, I feel like Death Knight has some powerful cards. The ones that really stand out to me, Eliza Goreblade definitely seems quite strong. I'm going to move this slightly up so it's more centered with this. But yeah, this definitely feels like a pretty strong card that has a lot of potential. So does the Ghoul's Knight, especially in combination, right? If you have multiple Eliza Goreblade triggers, right? Say you manage to get that death rattle twice. So you just get it once, right? This is 10 damage for 4 mana. If everyone has no board, boom, blast you, and have a bunch of 2/1s in play. Get Eliza twice, boom, 15 damage if you have nothing in play. So definitely feels like a very, very strong possible combination of things. Buttons, the tourist card, the other legendary, hard to say, right? I don't know what you're really looking to do with a spell school Death Knight deck in quite the same way. But yeah. And then there's just some solid role players. The Dreadhound Handler feels really good. And this guy, the Brittlebone Buccaneer, definitely feels like a very solid card to support any kind of death rattle, or even just a undead type strategy with just a couple of death rattles. Even this, alongside, like I said, the Puppeteer is a super powerful card that can do a lot of work in that style of deck. So yeah, definitely some sweet stuff that I expect to see play, and looking forward to trying it. All right, that's Death Knight. Let's continue. Next up, we have Demon Hunter. Right now, there's only really aggro Demon Hunter that you tend to see in Standard. There's the aggro with the with the Umpire's Grasp, even nerfed, still pretty good with Window Shopper, as well as like the 1/3 that gets plus attack based on your power. Some of them are still playing, you know, the Naga Sharpshooter thing. But yeah, this a 6-cost 5/2 weapon doesn't lose durability when you control a minion with 5 or more attack. Like obviously this can be a powerful effect. Just getting a sort of endless weapon swing here. But doesn't really necessarily feel super exciting to me. Like I feel like there's a lot of you know, a lot of powerful Demon Hunter cards, right? Like a lot of like powerful like faster Demon Hunter cards in this. Demon Hunter doesn't like, you know, like really feel like it has like, you know, a great like big minion theme. There are definitely some powerful big minion things, like some of the sort of big demon stuff, but that requires a lot of support, and this doesn't really feel like it survives to get you there. So I do sort of question. It is a way to have like a Demon Hunter deck have like a lot of long game power against control, especially if you can pretty readily get big dudes down. Notably, you can play this with the 1/3 I was discussing. That gets attack equal to your attack, so you can just get, you know, have this on with a 1-drop, and that's fairly powerful. But it's hard for me to imagine a world where this is a great card that doesn't also already involve like Vipers as being a common card, which end up making this a lot harder to use. Next up, Dangerous Cliffside, a 4-cost location with 3 durability. Summon 2 1/1 pirates with charge. After hero attacks, reopen this. So this is a pretty, you know, if you have ways to buff the guys, this can be a pretty powerful location. It can very easily get, you know, 4 1/1 chargers in one turn that you can kind of bank by playing this and then using it later. There have been Death Knight cards like Feast of Souls. I actually kind of forget if Feast of Souls is currently legal. I'm gonna look it up real quick. Feast of Souls, Hearthstone. Is that currently legal? I don't remember. I don't think it is. I think it's currently not in standard. But yeah, definitely doesn't feel like a card that without something like Feast of Souls is likely to be that good. Definitely needs support to make the 1/1s stronger. If there are ways to, you know, easily boost your small minion attack, it can certainly be strong. But otherwise, feels like you have a lot of better options available in Demon Hunter for aggression. Next up, Patches the Pilot. This one's cool. 1/1 for 1. Battlecry, summon 6 parachutes in your deck, summon a 1/1 pirate with charge when drawn. This I think is, you know, a very cool card. Certainly less miserable than old Patches, which was just, you know, always in charge, came up every single game, got your opponent. But this is, you know, hey, if you want to draw Patches now instead of trying Patches be a terrible thing. Demon Hunter has a lot of powerful card draw effects. So this being just an incidental way you can play this and then just get a bunch of like extra dudes over the course of the game can be reasonably powerful. Again, I do feel like it's a bit weaker without ways to take advantage of, you know, having a bunch of small minions. So, you know, without stuff again like Feast of Souls, like ways to buff those small minions, it does feel a little bit less impressive than it otherwise might be. But does feel like you're getting a lot of long game pressure and value for a very low investment. Next up, we have Sigil of Skydiving. Again, lots of stuff. This is actually, I haven't really seen many of the Demon Hunter cards, so it's possible that we get through to some of these and I'm like, oh yeah, here's a bunch of ways to use these 1/1s. Because here's another way to make 1/1s. Start your next turn, summon 3 1/1 pirates with charge. You know, again, if we stumble across one of these cards going through this that is like, hey, your 1/1s are amazing, great. But this is, you know, this is just 2 mana for 3 bodies and potentially just 3 damage face the following turn, which, if there is support for these 1/1s, has the potential to be quite powerful. Boom. Skirting Death, Shadow Spell. Choose a minion. This turn, your hero steals 4 attack from it. It's kind of mediocre. This feels like you need there to be a minion that has 4 attack for this to do anything. Yes, you can like get a bunch of attack. It does damage. Just this feels like it's way too conditional and doesn't do nearly enough, frankly. Paraglide. Remember Glide? This isn't it. 3 cost. Both players draw 3 cards. Outcast only you do. I know people are going to try to like, use this as like a mill card somehow because people love the idea of fatiguing their opponents. I do think that like against decks that are likely to have like a big hand, being able to overdraw your opponent is potentially pretty strong. Against like combo style decks, I do think people generally overvalue overdrawing their opponents. They're most of the time, unless your opponent is playing some form of like combo deck, it doesn't matter if they're missing a couple of cards because you could just imagine those in the bottom of the deck and wouldn't have drawn them anyway. But it can be powerful in certain matchups. It can give you information, and obviously this has the utility of possibly just giving you 3 cards for 3 mana, which is a powerful effect to begin with. So I do think this card is probably worse than most people's initial impressions because they overvalue the overdraw, but still a pretty solid card. Arana Thrill Seeker, a priest tourist. Damage your hero takes on your turn is redirected to a random enemy. So there are some like self-damage priest cards in this expansion that this can synergize with. I think people are going to kind of look at that text box and freak out that it's basically like Warlock Quest. But obviously this is like a temporary effect that only matters while this is in play. It can be removed, unlike the Warlock Quest, which is permanent once it actually hits. You could use this with Fatigue, right? Like you could, play a deck that has the goal of drawing basically its entire deck, casting this, and drawing a bunch of cards. Because Demon Hunter is very, very good at drawing a bunch of cards, right? So that I think is probably like the strongest effect of this much of the time. But that feels like it's gonna need to be like very, very dedicated deck to super, super heavy card draw. And yeah, you obviously can have like any kind of like multi-attack cards. Multi-strike is not in standard. Being able to obviously hit like a giant minion can happen too. But I feel like if you're gonna build this as a strategy, right? Like you want things that are gonna fundamentally guarantee you self-damage, and it isn't like your opponent having a giant minion. So, but yeah, as far as the actual priest tourist thing, again, there's like the Mind Blast Both of Us card. Again, I don't really have like an encyclopedic knowledge of all the cards that have been revealed in this because I haven't been paying enough attention. So it's harder for me to evaluate like the specifics of what this means for each of the various tourist classes. But yeah, so notably, priests have access, or rather, demon hunters have access to priests. Priests don't have access to demon hunter. It's not like a just multi-class thing. It's kind of a clockwise sort of circle thing. So yeah, next up. All-Terrain Voidhound. Whenever this attacks, give your hero +5 attack. It is a 7-cost 5/8 demon. I mean, this is a cool card for that weapon because it has an infinite durability and basically attacks for 10. But this is also a 7-cost 5/8 that does nothing when you play it. So I think this card is probably just bad unless you use this with like All Fel Breaks Loose or whatever the 0-cost thing, Felon Flame. Right, this with Felon Flame is pretty powerful because if you can rush this and immediately get like the 5 attack, that can be pretty valuable. But without rush, without any way to take advantage of this immediately, this just feels like a very weak card. Next up, Adrenaline Fiend. Here we go. Here's a payoff for all the 1/1 charge guys. After friendly pirate attacks, give your hero +1 attack this turn. So yeah, this is basically what you end up wanting to use the location with, the patches with, the sigil with. This is your payoff of, hey, you get a bunch of extra damage from each of these pirates attacking. Is this enough of a payoff? I don't know about making these good, but it feels like it may be a little bit too unreliable without like more things to actually have for the pirates. But obviously, that is the intended payoff card for having a bunch of things that are making 1/1s with charge. And lastly, Cliff Dive. Summon 2 minions from your deck, give them rush, they go back at the end of the turn. So, well, we found a way to give the All-Terrain Voidhound rush. So it is not a just dopey card. It can be used with Cliff Dive. This is basically this is Big Demon, right? This is the Big Demon payoff type card that they have right now. So this is like, hey, you play big stuff. Maybe they have attack triggers. Maybe they have death rattles. Maybe they, have maybe like Illidari Inquisitor, right? Like this feels like there's a lot of things you could possibly use this with. Just big things probably isn't that good, because if it's just big things, you're like, okay, I play this. If you don't have things for me to like trade my big things into, it's not that big a deal. But yeah, like powerful like death rattle, powerful like attack triggers. Again, like Illidari Inquisitor / this dude / like, I'm trying to think of other stuff. There's like, it's actually around. There's the 9/9 guy, right? That guy's still around. That like when he takes damage, your opponent takes it back. Yeah, you could have this with like Yogg in your deck. You could have this with like the Titan in your deck. The Titan, obviously gaining rush isn't a big deal, but you could use its effect and get like, life steal off of things and rush down some other things, get discount from your other things. So yeah, this definitely wants to be used with specific attack triggers, specific end of the battlefield triggers. Here I am talking Magic. Not battle cries, obviously, but effects that you can use that don't matter if it attacks are also pretty good. So overall, I think there's some really interesting Demon Hunter stuff. I'm unconvinced by the like pirate package stuff. It feels like it may not be good enough to compete with some of the other aggressive things that Demon Hunter is already doing. There's not like, it's not like there's like Blade Dance or anything that really gives you a payoff for having like a high attack to make this more than just like, hey, this is just another way to get damage. But yeah, overall, I feel like this is less impressive than some of the other things. I do think the big demon stuff is interesting, or at least the big guy stuff is interesting. But yeah, we could try like this Cliff Dive with like literally you could imagine just having Illidari Inquisitor in your deck, like 2 Illidari Inquisitors, so you can always potentially hit them with this. You need ways to like shuffle them back into your deck otherwise, and I can't really think that there's those that currently exist. There was the 0 cost gain attack, so probably not worth trying to just do that and like have a weapon up and then just smash them, but it is an option. But anyway, overall, Demon Hunter, some neat stuff. I'm not blown away by any of it, but I certainly think that there is some potential there. All right, let's keep going. Next up, we have Druid. Our first Druid card is Hiking Trail. Also, worth noting, I believe we are getting Splish Splash Whelp back, right? Splish Splash Whelp was banned temporarily due to the crazy performance of Druid prior to the release of the set. Splish Splash Whelp was banned and is now returning with a change. Splish Splash Whelp is going to be a 3-mana 3/2 with the same ability rather than a 2-mana 1/1, which I think is kind of funny. Now it's just like, no, Druid really can't get Wild Growth. They can get 3-mana Wild Growth, but they cannot get Wild Growth. But worth noting, just while we're looking at Druid cards, there's not the same ability to ramp as quickly. There is still the ability to ramp, but it requires a little bit more mana to do it. But Hiking Trail, new location. Discover a taunt minion after you gain armor. Reopen this. There's so many bad taunt minions nowadays. This feels like it's fine. Like it just feels like Druid, has so many powerful cards. Ellie's coughing. Poor Ellie. I give you a cough meds, girl. No. Letting her cough a little bit. Feeling better? All right. But yeah, I think that this is a fine card, but fine cards really aren't good enough in Druid, right? Like Druid just has such powerful cards as we've seen that like this incremental value card when you have stuff like Eoner and Marin and Ray Straza and all these things like hey, you can discover a taunt minion even if you can get 3 of them for 1 card pretty easily and you don't even have to wait that many turns because it has a pretty easy reopen just doesn't seem that good to me. So I'd be pretty surprised if Hiking Trails saw any meaningful play. Next up, we have Hydration Station. Obviously, the idea of, hey, play this with your big taunt minions that you discover. You don't need to discover them. You can just play them, right? I don't really feel like, like, what are the big taunt minions that you might want? There's obviously Fi, which is powerful. But this is a very expensive card, right? This is an 8-cost card. And this is, it is worth noting the various tourist things. Warrior does have tourist into Druid. You could potentially play a taunt warrior deck with this. This can get back a Ziliax, right? Ziliax is probably the best thing to Hydration Station. And maybe you play like Unkiliax, right? Like, and you get back 2 of them because you have your 2 10-cost Ziliaxes are the most powerful things. So definitely some possible power here. It is worth noting that we do live in a world with Yogg and Reno, which makes playing a deck that is built around resurrecting big minions a dangerous thing to rely on because there's always the possibility they get stolen or poofed. So I'm a little bit skeptical of just how good this card can be. Next up, we have Cruise Captain Laura. 7-cost 4/5 pirate battlecry, summon 2 random locations. I mean, there are some expensive, powerful locations in this set, but I just feel like 7-cost minion getting this, like a couple locations is just like it's such a huge investment for a random effect that you're not guaranteed is going to have any sort of meaningful benefit to you. So maybe there's some sort of like location, like theme. I don't know, but it just does not feel like it's likely to be good enough to really justify actually putting into your deck from a power level standpoint. If you do get like, double up on a double up on what's it, Prison of Yogg-Saron or something, sure, but this just feels like it's too little for too much and not nearly reliable enough. Next up, we have Dozing Dragon. This is me from the hours of around 10 or 11 until 6 a.m. Dormant for 2 turns. That's a turn is about 4 hours. While dormant, summon a 3/5 dragon with taunt at the end of your turn. I mean, this is fine. The immediate impact you're getting from it is, you're spending 5 mana for a 3/5 taunt, right? And then you get another 3/5 taunt the next turn. It's fine. But like there are so many powerful cards in Druid again, and so many powerful tempo cards, and so many powerful value cards that this being like here is some incremental value just doesn't feel like it's good enough, right? It feels like you're getting 0 mana 3/4s when you're playing a dragon deck in Druid. So this just feels like it's not quite good enough to justify including it over a lot of the other options that exist. Next up, Bouldering Buddy. A 7-cost 6/7 rush taunt, costs 1 if you have at least 10 mana crystals. Fine. There are good a lot of good ramp effects. Anything that is cost reduction like this is pretty powerful, right? Like anything that allows you in the later stages of the game to be able to just put a ton of stats into play can have some value. That said, once you have ramped to 10, the cost reduction is that much less relevant. And this isn't like the beetle, right? That can actually just like charge and kill your opponent, which is another one of the like, hey, you care about having lots of mana minions. So this is I think fine, but not amazing. And I think, as I've said before, you need to be pretty amazing to find your home in Druid decks these days. That said, the ability to go over 10 mana does exist, both with Audio Amplifier and with a new card, which I'm just going to go over here right now. New Heights. Increase your maximum mana by 3 and gain an empty mana crystal. This is, new wild growth that is interesting. You can actually go to 16 with these because each of them, does matter. If you have ways to discover more of them, you can go to 19. You can go to 22. If you play Audio Amplifier first and then play this, you go to 14. This, we're not back to like Guff levels of just playing one card and going to 20. Also, Guff obviously being a ramp spell that also drew you cards and continue to ramp you was crazy. This is a singular spell that does it once, and going above 10 is powerful, but going to 13 is very different than going to 20. I do think this will be a powerful card that does see play. It enables a ton of new play patterns that are available by having more than 10 mana in a turn, and be able to reset your mana crystals with Eoner when you have a maximum of say 16 is clearly making that very powerful card even that much more powerful. Next up, Tortolan Traveler. A 3-cost 1/5 taunt with Death Rattle. Draw another taunt minion, reduces cost by 2. This could very much wants us to be a taunt deck, clearly. But yeah, I feel like this is potentially a strong card for early game defense that can draw you a Ziliax that can try and bridge to your reanimate guy, reanimate spell. But certainly a powerful card against aggressive decks. And again, I do think it's a little bit unfortunate that we're mostly going to see this with Ziliax, because Ziliax is so nutty, and especially with the Reborn Ziliax, which works so well with Rehydration Station. But yeah, I do think that there is at least this, I think, is actually probably the more important of all these cards for a Taunt Druid deck being viable, because it is giving you a meaningful early game play that also gives you the ability to sort of accelerate into your more powerful effects later on. Next up, Mista Vista. 5-cost 5/5. Mage Tourist. With Battlecry, in 3 turns, replay every spell you've cast between now and then. And this is a wildly interesting card, right? Oops. Wildly interesting. But yeah. I think that both Mage Tourist and Druid, right? Like, what are you possibly interested in Mage Touristing? You can get the legendary spell for your Mage Tourist thing, which is hilarious, right? Recast all of your big spells that you've cast. I guess you can't. Never mind. It has to be Perils in Paradise. My brain keeps not processing that it has to be from this set, which again I get from a balance perspective, but it's a little bit sad from a deck building perspective of hey, what are the cool things it can do? And I haven't looked at the Mage cards yet, so I don't know what you can do with this. So, but even just the effect, in 3 turns, replay every spell you've cast between now and then. There's a lot of powerful spells you can cast, like say this one, Sleep Under the Stars. 7-cost arcane spell. Choose thrice. Draw 2 cards. Gain 5 armor. Refresh 3 mana crystals. So yeah, this can be just a 7-cost draw 6 cards, gain 15 armor, or gain 2 mana. Probably not going to use that. But the refresh mana crystals part of this is so strange to me, right? It's really strange to me. Because it's why is that on a choose thing? I get it does offer some optionality, but it just feels like such a strange thing of okay, I'm going to play this, and it's going to be a 4-cost gain 10 armor. It's going to be a 4-cost, draw 4 cards. I assume you can choose the same mode more than once, or else it would always just be a 4-cost draw 2 gain 5, right? So you clearly can choose the same effect more than once. But yeah, a lot of optionality here. Obviously, you do have to get to 7 before you can use it. But yeah, definitely an interesting card that I do think is likely to see play, because it does have very, very powerful options. And lastly, we have Trail Mix. Gain 2 mana crystals next turn only. So this is interesting. It's old school innervate, but it's an investment, right? You say, hey, I am going to innervate next turn. Yeah, or underload. You get 2 extra mana crystals. But yeah, I think that this is certainly a card that people are going to experiment with. Certainly way worse than an innervate was, because you can't just like pop off with it immediately. You have to invest in it in advance. And it does give your opponent some amount of ability to sort of prepare for you trying to do a very powerful thing. But even just being able to like play this and then play as an early you know Eoner, Raystraza, Giant Thing, Marin, whatever, is I think quite strong. So yeah, I do think this is likely to see play. People at least experiment with it because people love their like big burst effects ahead of time. So yeah, your underload right there, underload innervate. I do think the most interesting cards to me in Druid, I think that this New Heights, certainly a powerful card, certainly one that is going to see play and is going to open up new sort of deck builds because of the increased mana available. I also think that this card, the Tertullian Traveler, is a very interesting one. You don't even necessarily have to play like Taunt Druid for this to be good, right? If you're playing just a deck that, if there are aggressive decks and you're playing Druid and you have Ziliax Fi in your deck, right? You can play this because just drawing your Ziliax or Fi and reducing the cost by 2 is a powerful effect. So yeah, I definitely think these are certainly pretty interesting. Druid is not without a lot of really powerful cards already. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to change things too much because they have lots and lots of powerful things they can be already doing, but certainly some cool new options available. Oops. All right, moving along. Moving along, next up we have Hunter. And we have a very amusing card to start with, which is Sasquatch. 7 cost 4/5 Beast. With battle card, repeat each card you played last turn. Notably, repeat is the same as recast in this. It's just because it is a parrot. That's why it says repeat. This is clearly a card that has a lot of crazy options, right? If you just play like anything hugely powerful, if you play a bunch of things, I think this is definitely a very cool card with a lot of options. You will not get battle cries from the effects that happen. Notably, battle cries whenever you sort of replay a card, it has to be battle cry is specifically if this is played from your hand that it works. It's hard to even really consider what are all the possible implications of this because it's literally you can use this with anything. I would expect things like big minions. I expect like some sort of like damage combo stuff. I am curious if it's exactly like a test that just replays them randomly, or if it like recasts them at the same targets if you can. I'm gonna guess it's probably tests and not able to recast all of your like quick shots at your opponent's face or whatever. But yeah, imagine this on like a turn after you like play Marin, play Wand, play a bunch of stuff from the Wand, or like play Wand into things, and then play this. The next turn you get the Wand back replayed and all the things that you played for free. Very powerful. It is also notably, this is a card that someone can tourist for, right? Priest can tourist for this. There's the Priest Hunter tourist card. So Priest could do a crazy bunch of stuff and have this as the one card that they get from Hunter in order to do this. So that's cool, right? That's actually one of the interesting things with tourist that you could possibly do. Next up, Death Roll. 5 cost spell, destroy an enemy minion, deal damage equal to its attack randomly split among all enemies. So yeah, you don't want to play just like say a Fanatum against a Hunter. This is gonna blow up all your stuff. This is a powerful card. It is it is a 5 cost spell that doesn't do anything if your opponent doesn't have a minion. But it is the first like targeted minion removal, like direct, like, hey, this card alone kills your minion of my choice that I think has ever existed in Hunter. And obviously, if you're playing big stuff, this can just nuke your opponent's face. They have like a giant taunt. If they have just like a huge minion of any kind, it is super situational, right? Like if you're playing this against like a deck full of small minions, this card's gonna be absolute trash. But it is a very powerful way to bash through big minions that would otherwise potentially be a problem. Next we have Bird Watching. Discover minion from your deck. Give all copies of it +2/+1 wherever they are. Very similar to the Wrangler, Warsong Wrangler, which was just a 3/4 with essentially the exact ability. This is, I think, just a cool card with a lot of different stuff. There's, like Hollow Hound with this can be powerful. Any kind of yeah, this could be the priest take this and use it with like automaton or something would be kind of hilarious. But yeah, lots of like rush minions. If there are like charge minions, there aren't like, I can't think of, like I guess you could use this and like get like South Sea deckhands or something and charge your opponent down. But yeah, lots of like things that care about how big they are in Hunter, with like battle cries, attack triggers, things like that. This could be quite good with. Next up we have Chatty Macaw. Repeat the last spell you cast at an enemy at a random enemy if possible. So if you are playing like big, powerful targeted spells like Death Roll, this can be a way to take advantage of them. I can't really think of that many great enemy targeted spells you want to cast a lot in Hunter off the top of my head, because this doesn't do anything with spells that don't target an enemy minion, right? Like this won't do anything with tracking. This won't do anything with even like Star Power. Star Power does not target an enemy. It's a spell that damages enemies but doesn't target them. So there's some weirdness here that I think will end up confusing some people. But I feel like this is probably at its best again with like something like a Death Roll if you're looking to play like Control Burn Hunter. And so we have Catch of the Day. One cost 3/3 rush. Battlecry, summon a 2/1 worm for your opponent. This is an interesting card. Being able to to kill the worm for free would make this like really powerful. Like if you have like if there were like a candle shot type card. But yeah, this does feel like it is a good board control card for the early stages of the game. If someone has like a difficulty dealing with this, this could be a really powerful card against like aggro demon hunter, right? Like they play a 1/3, you're like, eat it. And that's one of the things that Hunter has historically sometimes had problems with, is your opponent just like playing a 1/3 on one, right? Where you're like, oh, I don't have great ways to like come back from being behind this. Whereas this is like, hey, this is going to give me the ability to dominate the board with my like 3/3 rush until you are actually able to remove this, and then potentially come back from that situation. Next, Ranger Gilly, a 6-cost 4/6 warrior tourist. With the end of your turn, get a 2/3 Cockalisk. Death Rattle, give all minions in your hand +2/+3. So this is a powerful hand buff effect. Like Death Rattle, like +2/+3 is really strong. The warrior tourist is an interesting effect in Hunter. It could be kind of funny to just try and play Highlander Hunter and use Ranger Gilly and just get Bran. The Bran costs 8 now. Is probably just way too bad. But like this, as a Death Rattle, there's lots of really powerful things to give +2/+3. Like again, if you are playing like a Highlander deck, Theodrin or whatever, whatever his name is, the attack all your opponent's stuff, really powerful to hand buff. Like if your opponent doesn't kill this immediately, just keep getting dudes every turn. And that alone is like actually pretty powerful. So obviously just being a 2/3 Carcalisk and not like a taunt minion is not super relevant at that stage of the game, but it is still like giving you bodies that do matter. As far as like the warrior tourist cards, you can't get Bran. I was thinking you could get Bran. You can't because it's not from the set. We haven't actually gone to the warrior cards yet, so I don't actually have the 100% vision of everything that's possible. But I want to be able to get Bran because I wish it worked differently. Next, Parrot Sanctuary. 2-cost 2/3. Your next Battlecry minion costs 1 less. After you play a Battlecry minion, reopen this. I'm trying to think of like powerful battlecry minions to like ramp out with this. Um, I mean, you can even like ramp out like a King Crush, right? Like the King Plush you can ramp out with this. There's obviously the various parrots. This does allow you potentially to play multiple things in one turn, right? With your Sasquatch, like play a battle cry. Although awkwardly, the battle cries are things that it doesn't repeat itself. But like yeah, Mukla is a battle cry, right? And Mukla is something that if you get a cheap Mukla and then get a Sasquatch out, getting the 10/10, you don't get the battle cry effect of giving them a bunch of stuff. So definitely a powerful thing to Sasquatch and get an extra copy of. Next up, Pet Parrot, a 2-cost 1/1 battle cry. Repeat the last 1-cost card you played. So kind of neat. You play a 1-drop, play this, get an extra copy of the 1-drop and a 1/1. Um, Not necessarily like hey, I got an extra body, but if you have like a cool cool one, especially if you have one with like a negative battle cry, right? This could be a powerful way to get extra copies of that without the drawback. Next we have Furious Fowls. 6-cost spell, choose an enemy, summon 2/3/2 birds with immune while attacking to attack it. So this does work with your parrot that hits an enemy, right? Because this targets an enemy. And then you're like, all right, I'll play the repeat my thing that targeted enemy. Boom, and this can just go straight to your opponent's face, right? This can just be bird burn or burn BIRN. I don't know. It is a interesting like removal slash board presence thing. You could also theoretically use this with like Bunny Hopper to be able to like attack with the birds right away as rush minions, which does have some possible cool power to it. And lastly, we have the Trussy Fishing Rod. 3-cost 1/2 after your hero attacks, summon a 1-cost minion from your deck. So this, if you have buff effects, right? I can imagine there's like the amalgam, right? The neutral amalgam, which I'm not. Yeah, let's just go. Actually, I won't be able to find it because they're not labeled by name. But there's the 1-cost 1/2 amalgam that keeps buffs, right? And playing like that with this and bird watching and other ways to buff the guy could be pretty interesting, right? You just keep making these 1-cost guys, and you have these. You play 2 copies of this to summon them and resummon them in various ways to buff the amalgams. Feels like it could be kind of interesting. You could play them with like magnetic stuff because they have all minion types. But yeah, it definitely seems interesting. You could play this. This could be the card that you priest tourist for in your automaton deck, and you just summon your automatons with it. So yeah, all kinds of interesting options there. As far as like the overall set of hunter cards, I think Sasquatch is very interesting. Also, one of the more interesting cards to possibly tourist for. I think this guy is underrated. I've seen people saying that they think this guy's like the worst card in the set and things like that. I think people really underrating the death rattle effect. I'm not sure exactly how we end up using the warrior tourist thing, but there are like warrior hand buff cards if you want to try a hand buff style deck that maybe you tourist those into your deck. And there are I think some pretty interesting and pretty powerful tourist things that are warrior things and hand buff things that are worth exploring. So. I do think that the parrot is also an interesting thing. Being able to get an extra instance of say Death Coil in the right matchup can be very very powerful, and in other matchups having the ability to bring back say your Furious Fowls is also pretty cool. But Hunter's always in a weird spot where it's like when you have cards that are not hyper aggressive, it can be very difficult for some of the Hunter decks to really leverage them. We have obviously seen like mid range Reno style Hunter decks be reasonably powerful, but with the multiple nerfs to Reno, that card has gotten a lot harder for a mid-range style deck to use. So we shall see how Hunter does in Perils in Paradise. All right. All right, next up, we have Mage. Our first card in Mage is Tsunami. 8-cost Frost spell. Summon 3/3/6 water elementals that freeze. They attack random enemies. This is a pretty cool card. You know, like, it gives you a board presence. It could potentially be just like 8 damage to your opponent if they have nothing in play. It being a Frost spell means you can use it with Watercolor Artist and possibly get it, discounted repeatedly. It being an 8-cost spell gives you something to possibly use with the orb, the infinite projection orb that isn't Yogbox. So yeah, this is a pretty interesting card that I think has the possibility of like shutting down weapon decks, of just giving you cool board presence. Get it cool, because they're freezing things. Next up, we have Marooned Archmage. 3-cost 3/3 with the first spell each turn costs 2 less. Notably, the first spell, period, not the first spell you cast. This discounts your opponent's spells. So that makes it a very dangerous card to play in most metagames. I certainly would be terrified to play this against, say, a Druid, who I just play this and they're like, okay. Oh, it does say your. Huh! I can't read. Let's just start this review of this card over. It literally, I just can't read. Next up, we have Marooned Archmage. 3-cost 3/3 that says your first spell each turn costs 2 less. This is, a pretty powerful effect. That, obviously with Sorcerer's Apprentice, we've seen how powerful that can be. Obviously, this isn't Sorcerer's Apprentice in terms of being able to reduce all of your things to 0 because it is the first spell, but 2 less is a lot, right? Being able to play this, if it isn't removed, then just the next turn you can play a 6-cost spell. Notably, it does have the coin prep issue. You can't coin out a big thing because your coin is going to be your first spell. But yeah, certainly for any mage deck that isn't a full-on spell deck that wants to ramp into big spells, this has the potential. And there's some other things in this set that are also excellent for big spell decks, like not this one. There was the other one. I thought it was a different legendary. Anyway, this is Rayla Sand Sculptor, a 4-cost 2/5 with Paladin Tourist. After you cast a spell, summon a random 2-cost minion and give it Divine Shield. Obviously this is a very powerful trigger. A 5 health minion for 4 can be pretty difficult to kill as well. You're most likely going to want to use this and immediately start casting some spells. If, for instance, you have your Archmage that survives the turn, then you play this. You can play a 2-cost spell for free, and you can use things like Primordial Glyph to get free spells you can cast alongside this as well. Being able to like build up a board presence as mage is like rarely your sort of plan, but be able to get just a bunch of cheap spells into a bunch of Divine Shield minions means that even like mass removal isn't necessarily going to take them out. So certainly an interesting card. Next up, we have Tide Pools, a 3-cost location. Discover a spell that costs 3 or less. After you cast a spell, reopen this. I do think this is more appealing to me than, say, the Taunt one for Druid. I think that there's just a lot of great utility spells, and this being essentially a 3-cost 3-cost way that you just discover 3 spells. Obviously, 3 spells that cost 3 or less, they're not going to be like massive game-winning things, but maybe they are because maybe they're Primordial Glyph and they find you a massive game-winning thing. Just it feels like a pretty powerful effect. Very easy to reopen. If you're looking to chain cheap spells with, say, Rayla, in order to get a bunch of cheap minions, also works very, very well there. Next, we have Surfalopod, not Cephalopod, Surfalopod. With 5-cost 5/6 Beast. Battlecry. The next spell you draw is cast when drawn. So there are some cards in this set that are like, hey, big spells. This is one of them. This is a really powerful effect. If you are only playing big spells like, say, Tsunami, right? This if you cast when drawn this, boom, hey, we just cast 8 mana worth of stuff for free. Super good, right? And you definitely want to play this specifically in a deck that's mostly playing big spells. We've seen big spell mage style decks before. I'm not sure if there's like enough good tools to do that right now, but this is certainly a very powerful spell for that style of deck. Next we have Rising Waves. Deal 2 damage to all minions. If none die, deal 2 more. This is a pretty powerful AoE type effect, right? And notably, this is like excellent against, say, Insanity Warlock, right? Where like you build boards of 3/3s and 3/4s. Like, like this can be a really, really easy way to just be like, boom, 4 damage AoE for 3 mana. That's very powerful, right? And in the situations where like you only need the 2 damage, great, also very good. So this is one of the better just like AoE type effects that I think that we have seen in quite some time. And like it's great against Divine Shield, right? If everyone has a board full of Divine Shields, hey, I didn't kill them with the first wave, here comes the second. Next up we have King Tide. Speaking of big spell cards, Battlecry, both players' spells cost 5 until the end of your next turn. So obviously a very strong way to support a big spell style deck. If you're playing a Cephalopods plus Tsunami plus whatever other big spells, certainly can help support that. I don't know necessarily what the other big spells will be, right? Like the other big spells, there's not like Dragonfire Amulet type effects in the current metagame. So I'm not really sure necessarily where you're going with this, but it is a very strong package of things. Notably, too, you can use this against opponents who are trying to play a bunch of cheap spells. Like, say, against Rogue, right? Like a Rogue opponent, this is going to shut down Shadow Step Breakdance. It's going to shut down all their Sonya shenanigans because everything, all their spells are going to cost 5. So that's a very powerful effect. But yeah, like there's basically the ones I can think of right now, Tsunami and like Sunfire Volley are the 2 really good big spells. I don't know if that's like enough, but you can certainly see. Next, you have Under the Sea. Draw a different spell. Summon a random minion of that spell's cost. That is another possible, like, decent big spell card if you're looking for like another thing, right, for that style of deck. If you're just playing, Under the Sea and then 9 and 10 cost, like 8, 9, 10 cost spells or whatever, great, That is another very reasonable inclusion in those style of decks that can give you board presence. Not quite as powerful, obviously, as actually casting the Tsunami or the Sunfire Volley, but certainly can give you another sort of payoff for being an all big spell deck that gives you a little bit more in the way of like hits for your things that care about drawing spells. Next, we have Go with the Flow. Choose a minion. If it's an enemy, freeze it. If it's friendly, give it spell damage +1. I mean, I can certainly see decks that are like, looking to be like cheap burn decks that are interested in this. Could give you a little bit of flexibility if you're like looking to, do a bit more burn. You can get the spell damage for like, any sort of things that are particularly boosted by spell damage and being able to buy you a little bit of time with the freeze effect. Just seems like it's probably not worth, Like if you're going to be looking for spell damage, you have a lot easier ways to get spell damage. If you're looking for freeze, there's a lot better ways to get freeze. And you probably don't want something that's not going to necessarily, really be as efficient in those sort of decks. And lastly, Sea Breeze Chalice. Deal 2 damage randomly split among all enemies. 3 drinks left. Well, this is definitely a card that cares about spell damage, right? Because this is one of the new drinks that are effectively like the banana / Barrel of Monkeys that we have seen previously. They are individual spells that you can cast up to 3 total times. You get them repeatedly in your hand. But yeah, this can be a very powerful way to take advantage of spell damage because this is one spell that you can cast 3 times for 1 each. That each cast benefits from spell damage. So that's pretty powerful, right? Obviously, if everyone has a big board, this can be less powerful. But if you can generate spell damage, like this card with like Sif, not that Sif needs help, but like this being a single spell that you can cast, to do as much damage. Granted, you're not going to replace the other things in Sif decks because the Sif decks can just burn past an opponent's board, whereas this has to go through their board first. But yeah, I think this is like also like a pretty reasonable card, like against possibly against like aggressive decks. It may be too bad because like you could just hit your opponent in the face. If you cast this like turn one, it's like okay, your opponent plays like say a Miracle Salesman. You can cast this. It's like only a like 50% chance they actually kill the Miracle Salesman, right? Um, but yeah, it's not even that, right? I don't know. Regardless, either way, I think this is like a card that like can be could be a powerful burn tool with spell damage if there weren't already better directions to do that with Sif. Overall, I think there's some pretty interesting stuff in Mage. My favorite stuff is definitely the big spell stuff. I think that King Tide is certainly an interesting and powerful card for like a big spell style deck that also has cool disruptive possibilities. And then that alongside like Surfalipod, giving you the ability to leverage Tsunami and Sunfire Volley, and then possibly even Under the Sea as like an extra way to take advantage of having big spells. I could very easily imagine just having one copy of this in those decks. That's like, hey, I want to, to use this. Even like playing Surfalipod on turn 5 into Under the Sea on turn 6, you're guaranteed to hit, your other big spell and get the effect of this and get the effect of the cast when drawn from Surfalipod. So pretty powerful stuff, I think. May not necessarily be better than the other options that Mage has right now, like Sith Mage, but certainly in my mind, much more interesting. Okay, we are on to Paladin. We're about halfway through class cards. I'm going to take a quick break and run to the bathroom. I will leave you with the pup cam, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Let me find. Where's my button? My button. There's the button. All right, next up we have Paladin. Boom. First card is Grill Master. 4 cost, 3/4, Battle Cry, draw your lowest cost card. Death Rattle, draw your highest cost card. Um, this is a weird card. It's super inefficient, like stat wise. 4 cost, 3/4 is pretty bad with no like immediate board impact, but effectively having draw 2 cards connected to it and having it be specific cards is very powerful. You know, like being able to guarantee, you know, you draw like a Ziliax or a Reno or, you know, a Giant, right? Those are all like pretty powerful effects. And drawing your lowest cost card, being able to find, you know, Righteous Protector or, you know, wide variety of like, you know, possibilities available for this. So it's definitely an interesting card. Paladin does sometimes lack with certain builds in really having card draw value, and this definitely gives that in a very interesting way. So I do think this is a card that, despite being kind of like inefficient body wise, has a lot of potential. Next, we have Sea Shanty. There is a possible big thing to draw with that. Just 10 cost. Summon 3/5/5 pirates. Cost 1 less for each spell you've cast on characters this game. Um, Kind of a weird one. Uh, there's obviously like buff effects, healing effects, all work with this. Just summoning 3/5/5s feels like it's a pretty low payoff. Um, you know, like it's they don't do anything right away. So like building a deck that's specifically designed with a payoff of, hey, I get some 5/5s kind of feels a little bit like disappointing overall. I even was playing like a Holy Paladin, right? And I was trying to play Holy Paladin with the glow stick thing as well as the 3/3 Gigantify guy who uh, costs 1 less for each holy spell you've cast. And that just like never, even just getting like a bunch of like cheap 8/8s late in the game just never felt that good. Like how, you know, how quickly does this get to be a reasonable thing to cast? Is this casting like 6, 7 mana? You know, like when are you casting this realistically? And it seems challenging to do that quickly. I mean, there are obviously some things like, say, this. Uh, no, this is yeah. Well, actually, this can kind of do it. At the end of your turn, getting 1 cost ice screen that gives +1/+2 last 3 turns. This is a card that gives you you know, cheap ways to buff minions, but you have to then play minions and buff them. Um, Giving you, you know, it's this like you can't just like play them all at once. The sunscreen card itself, I actually am curious if it's a holy card, because that does matter for the holy deck. The sunscreen card itself is not a holy spell, so it doesn't work with the things that care about the holy spells, even though this itself is a holy spell. But it is a targeted thing that, you know, does work for Sea Shanty, which is fine. But again, like, you know, you're doing a lot of investment if you are trying to build a Sea Shanty deck in, you know, getting a payoff that is not that immediately crazy impactful. Next up, we have Divine Brew. This is a great way to enable the Sea Shanty as well as possibly the holy spell. That's, you know, holy whatever spells. Um, 1 cost, give a character Divine Shield if it already had one. Give it +1 attack this turn, which is, you know, interesting. You're not like the fact that it's only this turn means that you're not like able to use this as any kind of like, you know, long-term buff effect. It is give a character Divine Shield, right? You can use this on your hero, which is interesting. So you don't even necessarily need minions for this. Though, you know, you probably want minions for this because giving your hero +1 attack for a turn is rarely going to be that good. Though, I mean, maybe you can, you know, use that, take out your opponent's cheap minions, which can sometimes be like a challenge for Paladin. So maybe it is better than I'm thinking. But notably, this does only care about casting spells on characters. So this does work even if you're using the Divine Brew on your face. Next up, we have Sun Snapper Linessa. Rogue Tourist, your spells that cost 2 or less cast twice. I am a little bit curious how that works with this, because that you've cast on characters, that this is cast twice. Doesn't say like repeat them. I wonder if this does work alongside the you know, give you multiple discounts for Sea Shanty, because you are it is casting twice. It says each spell you've cast on characters. Unclear to me exactly based on the wording whether that multiple discounts the Sea Shanty. Rogue Tourist. We've not looked at the rogue cards yet. If you were able to use rogue from anything, be able to use Sea Shanty with the pirate who summons copies of each pirate you control would be hilarious. But you can't do that. You'd have to somehow get like a shoplifter Goldbeard, like, you know, from something. But unfortunately, the tourist does not get you that card. But yeah, this is, you know, pretty powerful with just cheap buff spells. It obviously can use this very well. You can buff something for like several turns. Works with the sunscreens. One card getting you potentially 6 casts of this. Thanks to the Sunsapper Linessa, it does seem like it has the ability to be pretty powerful. Be able to double cast like Hand of Vidal is pretty strong. You can even like use this alongside, I assume, Holy Glow Sticks, right? Because you're supposed to cost 2 or less, cast twice. Holy Glow Sticks, if you've played a Holy spell, costs 1, so you could potentially just like nuke your opponent for a bunch of damage with Holy Glow Sticks with this card as well, which is a pretty interesting idea. Next up, we have Volley Maul. I get it, volleyball. After your attack, get a 1-cost sunscreen that gives +1/+2. So lots of things that are like, hey, get things to target minions. There is a lot that's sort of like pushing you in the direction of trying to play this Sea Shanty style deck. Next, we have 6-cost deal 4 damage, give a random friendly minion +4/+4 power spike. This is super inefficient. It is a holy spell, but like 6 mana for this is so much mana, you know. Like obviously the combination of effects is pretty powerful, right? Like this is kind of similar to, you know, like a Firelands Portal. It's obviously much weaker damage wise than Firelands Portal, but you can effectively get like charge on the minion because it is a buff. But if you don't have a minion, it's horrible, right? So this feels like a pretty mediocre card to me overall. Could be used in like some sort of, you know, like burst combo finish because it gives you effectively 8 damage if you have like a charge minion or a minion in play, but seems unlikely to be. Excuse me. Next we have Lifeguard, a 4-cost 2/7 taunt. Battlecry, the next spell you cast has lifesteal. This is a pretty powerful card, right? Like this a 2/7 taunt for 4 is, you know, just a pretty powerful effect in general. The next spell you cast have lifesteal, like casting, you know, like this in like a controlling style deck with like just consecration, right? You know, can be quite strong. Being able to consecration and, you know, gain a ton of life from the damage dealt to all of your opponent's minions. And this is not this turn. This is a banked effect. Notably, if you do play this and then play a spell that doesn't deal damage, it will consume the lifesteal buff to your next spell because that was your next spell, even if it didn't deal damage. It's not your next spell that does damage has lifesteal. So if you cast like this and then cast like Blessing of Kings, you don't do anything with it. It might seem like Blessing of Kings would give the thing that you target lifesteal because the spell has lifesteal, but that's not how it works. The spell itself has to, you know, having lifesteal does not mean it transfers lifesteal to something else. Yeah, you would have to like cast Equality, cast this, cast Consecration if you wanted to gain life off of that. So yeah, I do think, again, just a 2/7 taunt for 4 is a pretty high stat line to begin with. So this feels like a pretty powerful card for like a Paladin control deck. Next we have Service Ace. After this minion gains attack, reduce the cost of the highest cost card in your hand by 1. So this is an interesting card, along with the sunscreen producing effects. Like if you use this with life-saving aura, right, and you can play this and buff it a few times, that's multiple cost reductions from like effectively 2 cards and a body that your opponent has to deal with, right? This also can work with like an aura, right? Like you can have deputization aura and play this. I assume that would work, right? If you like just played this, I actually don't know how that would work. Um, whether it counts as gaining the attack if you play it next to a deputization, like just when you have a deputization aura. It would obviously work with the Crusader aura, but it would not work with deputization aura if you just played it into it because it just comes into play with that stat, I would guess. But yeah, be able to discount and like every deck these days has powerful things to discount, like Zilliax, right? Be able to just like get your Zilliax down early can be very powerful. We can potentially distribute the discounts across multiple things if this gets multiple discounts, and you have a number of high cost things. So this would not work with hand buffs, right? Because it is this text is only active when the minion is actually in play, so you don't get like buffing it in your hand and then reducing the cost of things. They don't have text active in their hand, or in your hand rather. And the last Paladin card we have is Sankazel. This is a 3/8 rush that when it attacks, it becomes a location. And I actually have the location. That wasn't it. Hold on. What? No, the wrong thing. I had the location saved and didn't actually save it. Yeah, it's a sandcastle. Hold on. Do. Okay, ta-da. There's the location it turns into. The sandcastle. So it is a give a friendly minion +3 attack and rush, and then turns back into a minion. So this, from my understanding, the location scales with the guy, right? So if you give the guy more attack, the location scales with it, and if you give him more health, the durability of the location scales with it. So it's a really interesting thing. Like you could potentially use it like in a hand buff deck, right? And like get a bunch of guys rushing, or get a bunch of like huge buffs on all of your minions. But yeah, it definitely seems like a very, very interesting card. I don't know everything you do with it. But this is like one of the cooler cards I think that in the expansion overall. I don't know like how the interaction of like the rush and the location works. Like, can you keep rushing into things and keep activating the location and other things? It's not totally clear to me. But like it kind of has Remornia vibes, right? If you have charge minions, you could potentially like use this. You attack into one of their guys. Like say this guy's like buffed. You attack into one of their guys. You use the location to buff a charge minion. Go face. Then he comes back. He rushes into another guy. You play another charge minion. You use the location on that to go face. I don't know if it works that way. I don't know if like the location stays closed, it flips back into the location. But either way, it is cool to have the ability to like basically have a big minion that you can like protect by turning it into location against board clear effects that are not Reno. So super cool card. Definitely my favorite, I think, of the overall Paladin cards. It does feel like it's pretty clear that this set of Paladin cards is largely trying to like push, hey, cast spell on minion deck. But again, I do feel like this, unless you get this off so fast, feels like it's just such a mediocre payoff. that I don't really know that it's worth it. Like you have to play this in like turn 5 or 6, and even then it's like, okay, I built my deck with a bunch of like low impact cards to get this out quickly, and now I got some 5/5s. My opponent killed them, and now my deck doesn't do very much. I do really like this guy. I think this is just like a generically good, value card that a lot of Paladin decks can use. But overall, I feel like I'm like medium unimpressed by the overall Paladin stuff. Lifeguard again feels like just a solid like role player and a control style deck that has damage based removal like Consecration. But Consecration, has kind of gotten largely obsoleted in terms of just how powerful it is. So it's possible that like this is just not overall worthwhile. You could use this a lot with like Prismatic Beam, right? And that ends up being a lot more effective for at least clearing your opponent's boards. But we shall see. Overall, like I said, not super enthused by overall what Paladin has. The tourist card is cool. The cast twice again, like I said, with stuff like Holy Glow Sticks is pretty exciting, and we'll have to take a look at what Rogue offers for their tourist cards for Paladin. Stop beeping at me. All right, next up, we have Priest. Priest has an interesting theme in this set of damaging itself. Starting off with Sensory Deprivation. This is not a damage yourself card, but it cares about yourself being damaged. 6-cost Shadow Spell. Summon a copy of an enemy minion if you have 20 or less health. Destroy the original. So, obviously, decks that have ways to damage themselves, get a lot of value out of this. Even if you don't have the 20 or less health, being able to get a copy of some enemy minions can be quite strong. But obviously, basically, 6-cost, steal your minion, right? It's not full on steal because I do still get death rattle effects. But like, being able to somehow leverage your health as a resource and then use that to turn on cards like this does feel quite powerful. Biddle-doo. That's me clicking on the next card and not clicking quite closely. Because that's the next card, Acupuncture. So this is probably not the sort of card that you want to play alongside Sensory Deprivation, unless you're just using Sensory Deprivation in like a really aggressive deck, which doesn't necessarily feel like it belongs in, but this is basically just Mind Blast both of us. Deal 4 damage to both players. This can be powerful in the sense of it's just an efficient way to damage your opponent if you're playing a hyper-aggressive deck. It can also, be hey, my deck can heal this well, so it is not really something that I'm worried about. And also things that can care about you damaging yourself, like the Sensory Deprivation or other priest cards. So this, again, like if there is like a hyper burn aggro focused priest deck, this is obviously going to be a fairly central role. And there are other cards like this, Brain Masseuse, 2/4 for 1. Whenever this minion takes damage, also deal that damage to your hero. Shield Slam lethal on this one, but this can be a very powerful, just like really difficult to remove early game tempo minion for an aggressive deck. It is undead. I don't think there's any really like undead priest synergies right now, but like aggressive shadow priest style deck with Acupuncture with this can put in a lot of pressure very quickly. Next we have Narain Soothe Fancy. I think it's one of the more interesting of the cards we've seen so far. Battlecry, get 2 fortunes that are copies of the top card of your deck. So my understanding is that this will, the fortune cards will kind of be like a Chameleos that'll keep changing into whatever the top card of your deck is, and that's interesting in a number of ways. One, you have the possibility of getting multiple copies of additional cards in your deck, which can be very interesting, especially for something like a Reno Priest deck. And two, you get information about what's coming up your next card. There's also cards that interact with the top card of your deck in Priest. I think this is one of them. Yes, Twilight Medium, a 6-cost 5/6 taunt with battle cries. Set the cost of the top card of your deck to 1. So this, the Twilight Medium, in combination with our buddy Narain, can potentially not only allow you to get a one-cost copy of your next card, but also play multiple additional copies of it right now with your fortunes. So say the top card of your deck is, I don't know, Reno. Not that you really want to play like multiple Renos, or like Elise, right? You're like, okay, I have my Narain. I have my fortune, in hand. I'll play my Twilight Medium. I'll get a one-cost copy of, set the Elise to one cost, and then I'll play the one-cost fortune Elise in my hand, and then I just still have this Elise that I draw next turn, and then I have, granted, you probably won't want Elise twice, but like Amanthul, whatever, in the same turn. So many powerful things that you can do with that. So these I think are really cool. I'm obviously someone who really enjoys controlling mid-range style, especially minions oriented priest decks. I love the some of the things that are possible with Reno Priest right now, and this gives you a lot more sweet, fun options, I think, that I'm excited to try. Next we have Chillin' Vol'jin. 3 cost 3/3. Battlecry, choose 2 minions, swap their stats. So old school Vol'jin just stole someone's health. This one, say your opponent has a big taunt and you have a couple of little guys. You're like, all right, I'm gonna swap your big taunt with my guy. I'm gonna kill your taunt with my other little guy and go face. Definitely feels like a powerful card in an aggressive priest deck with small minions, because you're gonna want to have small minions swap their big minions, right? Also, Hunter Tourist. We did take a look at the Hunter cards in this set, and there were some cool options. There's the Sasquatch that we saw that could be cool in kind of any priest deck, really. But this one does feel like it wants to largely go into like an aggressive deck. You could have a priest deck that gets to play Death Roll, right, with your tourist card. You could that card doesn't necessarily feel like it wants to play an automaton thing. But you do have, maybe it is an automaton deck and you play the trusty fishing rod. All kinds of neat options. But like, worst case scenario, there's always this. There's always, hey, I can just do whatever I did again. So, but yeah, getting back to Priest. Next card is Sauna Regular. A 5 cost 5/5 taunt, costs 1 less for each time your hero has taken damage on your turn. So obviously wants to be used with stealth damage effects. There aren't really like priest weapons, although you could tourist for a hunter weapon and use that. It does feel like you can obviously use like Brain Masseuse to trade into your opponent's minions, and this can just get pretty efficient, right? It already starts with a 5 cost 5/5, which is not great, but a 4 cost 5/5 taunt is pretty great, and a 3 cost 2 cost 1 cost 0 cost, all of those are quite powerful. So yeah, this definitely feels like a pretty strong card. I think it's like Demon Hunter that can tourist into Priest too, so this would be a very powerful card for them to tourist into when they attack into your stuff. As far as those options are concerned, but yeah, definitely, if there are additional ways to deal damage to yourself, like this Nightshade Tea, 2 cost spell, deal 3 damage to a minion, deal 2 damage to your hero. So this is a drink, so 3 casts possible with this. Very easy to reduce the cost of Sauna Regular down when you have triple cast available for Nightshade Tea. The fact that it's only to a minion does obviously make it a little bit less outrageous in terms of the amount of damage you're able to do with it. But very efficient removal. Priest typically doesn't have super efficient like damage based removal like this. But being able to burn down your opponent's minions, heal yourself up, whether it's through your hero power, whether it's through lifesteal, certainly some powerful options there. Next, we have Hot Coals. 3 cost fire spell. Weird that it's a priest fire spell, but deal 2 damage to all enemies. If your hero took damage this turn, deal 1 more. So this obviously a powerful AoE tool. 3 cost deal 2 damage to all enemies is also a burn spell. It's not just your opponent's minions, so it's not just like a holy nova. But if you're combine this with any of the ways the various ways you can self damage to fire that off, it's pretty powerful. Like 3 damage AoE to just your opponent's stuff is very, very strong effect. And lastly, Rest in Peace. 3 cost shadow spell. Each player summons the highest cost minion that died this game. Um, we don't really have like much in the way of like res priest right now. Um, and you know, like priest does have some reasonable ways to like poof your opponent's minions. So if you have, say, Amanthul, or you're stealing things with Yogg, or you're renewing them, you can try to make sure that they don't have big things to possibly get back with this, whereas you do. Um, but there's not like we don't have things like Shadow Essence to get like giant things to then resurrect like exist in Wild or have existed in previous standard formats. So this is one that I don't know that necessarily has a home right now in any sort of priest archetype, and I don't know that there's enough support to make it into kind of a reanimation priest style archetype. But I do think this is certainly a card that has a lot of potential if it has the appropriate support eventually. So overall, I definitely think that priest has a lot of interesting tools. I think the aggro priest direction, you know, the self damage priest, is certainly something that there's a lot of tools in this set to support. So you know, obviously that's like kind of the major direction that this expansion is looking to push people. Even like the fact that the tourist goes to hunter. I mean, it is interesting. There are frequently, cards in Hunter that's like, okay, well, this isn't necessarily a card that's great for Hunter because, you want it to be, it's more of like a controlling card. I don't think this set really has, other than Sasquatch, necessarily cards that feel that way. And a lot of the things that you do potentially have to recast. I mean, there are some pretty powerful things if you were to say Tourist for Sasquatch, like be able to recast a bunch of hot coals or whatever. Recast, this if you're at like a high life total. The acupuncture can be pretty strong. But I think the card that I'm most excited about for Priest is definitely Narain. Narain is like just a card that can go into kind of any Priest deck that's looking to play like a longer value sort of game, and it gives you a lot of cool utility that I think is very fun and a lot of cool information that definitely makes the game have a lot of more interesting decisions and options when you're playing. So this is my vote for my favorite priest card in the set, and I expect to play Narain quite a bit. All right, next up we have Rogue. Our first card in Rogue is Treasure Hunter Eudora. Coming at us from the Battlegrounds. 6 cost 4/5 at Battlecry. Go on a side quest to discover amazing loot. Play 3 cards from other classes to complete it. So what this does is you can discover I think one of the old duels cards. I think there's a certain set of them that you're able to get. But basically this is like, hey, play cards from other classes and then discover a duels treasure, which is cool and pretty powerful. I think it would be also sweet. You can like shadow step this, cast it multiple times, and get multiple loots. I imagine that the side quest doesn't stack. You can't play the same one multiple times at the same time. Like you couldn't shadow step Eudora and play Eudora again. You'd have to wait until you'd played the 3 and then play it. But I think it's just a really cool card. Obviously has a ton of variability, both in terms of what you actually get from this, but also like what the game looks like getting there, because you have to play cards from other classes that you have to have generated somehow in order to actually turn this effect on. So this is, I think, the sort of card that makes me want to play Rogue. Certainly seems like it has the potential to be really fun, and I'm looking forward to going treasure hunting. Next, we have Petty Theft. Get 2 random 1-cost spells from other classes. If you are looking to go on a treasure hunt with Eudora, or you're looking to enable Velorok or whatever, this is a great way to do it. Very, very quick way to get cheap things that you can play. So yeah, if you're looking to enable specifically cast spells from other classes, this is a very easy way to do it because you're guaranteed to get 2 of them, and they're 1-cost spells, so it's gonna be about as efficient as possible. Obviously, from like a power level perspective, it is it is, relatively low impact compared to pretty much any of the other thief effects. So if you're looking for impact from them rather than enabling effects like Eudora, you can definitely do better elsewhere. So I'll eat when I'm done. Next up, we have Snatch and Grab. 8 cost spell, destroy 2 random enemy minions, cost 1 less for each card you've played from another class. This is one of the things that maybe Petty Theft, can help enable. This doesn't just doesn't feel like a powerful enough effect to really, unless you're playing a deck that's like, hey, I'm just gonna cast tons of stuff from other classes. You're gonna have to cast a ton before this feels like it's at all worthwhile. And even then, like the effect you're getting is just kill 2 random enemy minions. That obviously in certain situations could be really powerful, but is it worth playing a card that is bad until you've done a lot of this and only getting the reward of, I guess I kill 2 things? It feels like like it's not a tempo effect until you've invested a ton of mana already. It's not like something that actually like wins you the game. It just feels like it's pretty unlikely to be something that that you really want to build your deck to support because it is fundamentally a reactive effect. Next, we have Metal Detector. After hero attacks and kills a minion, get a coin. It's interesting. I could maybe see wanting to play this in Wishing Well Rogue, where you really want to generate as many coins as possible. The fact that you have to attack and kill a minion rather than just attack is a huge downside in terms of being able to rely on this. If there's a metagame where like attacking into a minion for 2 is very likely to get you a coin, great. Otherwise, this feels like it's pretty unlikely to be a meaningful card in most matchups. Next up, we have Maestra Mask Merchant, Warlock Tourist, and Battlecry discover a hero card from the past. So this is kind of hilarious, right? Like Maestra coming back and she's like, hey, I'm going to pretend to be someone else. This is an awesome card, right? The fact that it's Warlock Tourist already means that if you're playing a deck that cares about playing cards from other classes, you're adding one to your deck, so you fundamentally already have that. And the Battlecry, discover hero card from the past. Notably, A, hero cards are really powerful, right? Like lots of the old hero cards are really powerful. And B, once you play a hero card, you become that class. So it fundamentally means that you recast all of your rogue spells when you play Tess. And that can be really strong. That is weirdly enough an argument that makes like Snatch and Grab more powerful in a deck like that, right? Like if you're playing a deck that's looking to play like a bunch of off class cards, and then you Snatch and Grab, and then you play Maestra, and then you play Tess, you just basically your Tess becomes kill all your opponent's stuff because you played Snatch and Grabs, is kind of interesting. So yeah, it is. I think overall Maestra's a really interesting card. I'm excited to just do wacky wild things by becoming other classes and other heroes. So certainly the sort of cards that make me want to play Rogue once again. Next we have O Manager. Deal 2 damage, combo, get a coin. Again, the sort of card that's if you're playing a Wishing Well deck, if you're playing a deck that's like trying to spell combo off, it's just a kind of solid utility-ish card. It is relatively low impact, just 2 for 2 damage, but the combo get a coin certainly feels like it has some solid potential. Next we have Knick Knack Shack. 3 cost location. Draw a card. If you play it this turn, reopen it. So this is like Miracle right now, right? This is like, hey, you want to play a ton of cheap cards in your deck and just chain them with this. So as long as you're like, like cast a spell, cast a spell, cast a spell, cast a spell. Draw a card, draw a card, draw a card, draw a card. This kind of feels like it wants to go in like the giant decks, right? Like this is another card draw effect that you can like kind of can be a multiple card draw effect. It can also just be if you're looking to multiple clockwork giant or whatever. This is another just way to chain through with that. That could be interesting. Next we have Conniving Con Man. 4 cost, 4/4 pirate. Battlecry, replay the last card you've played from another class. So this is a mini Tess, right? And this is actually pretty interesting, be able to have access to mini tests, to like just, you know, hey, I got like a high impact thing, I want to play it. This is, you know, obviously the sort of card that works much better with things like Velorok than things like the Petty Theft. You definitely want to play high impact things off of your Conniving Con Man rather than play low cost spells that just, you know, make your other stuff cheaper. But again, another fun incentive to play sort of thief style rogue. There's obviously, you know, the sort of the excavate rogue decks already you know, lean into being able to use a lot of that, but I imagine, you know, if you wanted to really lean into it, maybe you go away from the excavate direction and you're more focused on sort of the quests like Eudora and trying to get high impact things to leverage with Conman. Next up, we have Sea Shill. 3 costs 3/2 with Battlecry. The next card you play from a non-rogue class costs 2 less. Weirdly, that this one is specifically says non-rogue rather than another, even when a bunch of the other ones say another. Like this one says another, this one says non-rogue, which is a little weird to me. I'm trying to think of why that would matter. They just have different wording, but again, obviously a pretty powerful effect to help enable being able to use something like this. I guess like you could theoretically tourist the Sea Shill in to your deck and use it for a discount, which is interesting. This is the not a this turn effect too. Notably, this one is an effect that carries over, so you could just play this on 3 and have the modifier for multiple turns throughout the game. Anyway, lastly, we have Swarthy Sword Shiner. Battlecry, set the attack and durability of your weapon to 3. That's a powerful card. This is the first I've seen this. Like, you just can turn 2 hero power, turn 3 play this guy, and you just have a 3/3 dagger. Huh. Like, that's just solid, right? Huh. Shine up your dagger real good. But yeah, that's just a solid card. I don't know where this goes, right? Like, I don't know if this is a card that's weirdly like good enough to see play in any deck despite being really powerful, because it isn't necessarily synergistic with, like, you know, kind of any fundamental strategy. But if there's just like kind of a good stuff tempo rogue, this definitely feels like a powerful card. I mean, maybe this just sees playing like Excavate Rogue because you're just like, hey, I can just play, you know, I can just play my weapon on 1, play like a thing on 2 for tempo, play this, have a very powerful tempo swing on 3. Because one of the issues of that rogue deck can be that they kind of fall behind, you know, and don't get time to sort of leverage all of their advantages they gain from Excavate and all their bounce effect. And this can just be like, all right, boom, weapon plus body, just seems pretty solid. So yeah, this seems like it's just like a good card that can do a lot of solid tempo work for sure. Yeah, maybe this is what you you bring in your hand buff deck. You probably wouldn't do that, Tourist, because the Tourist card is terrible if you're not like leveraging the spell part of it, right? What would you possibly Paladin Tourist from this? I mean, this card multicasting, right? This card multicasting is sick. I don't know if any of these necessarily are like that. I mean, this you could tourist. Yeah, touristing this in. I don't know. This card draw. I don't know. Yeah, tourist being limited to the cards in the set makes it so much. I don't know. It does make it so much less exciting to me. I am just generally much less excited for the mechanic in general than I was when I just started this review, when I thought it worked differently. But I am excited for the overall rogue cards. Like Maestra is super fun. I think Treasure Hunter Eudora is super fun. I think, you know, having more things like you know, the Con Man and the Seashill that really sort of push you in the direction of playing a more Thief Rogue focused style of deck are really, really fun. It's exactly the style of Rogue decks that I enjoy. So obviously there's already Excavate Rogue, which does play a lot of stuff from other classes. But I think that having it be more dedicated Thief Rogue style of deck is just a more fun direction to me. And I expect to try some of it. So Rogue looks fun, and I'm sure I'll be playing it. I definitely agree that if it wasn't limited to the set, it's much harder to balance. And I talked about that as soon as I was, you know, oh yeah, it makes sense. It's just it's just so much less fun, you know. Okay, excuse me. Let's keep going. All right, next up we have Shaman, and we will start with Meltamental, a 3-cost 3/8 taunt, uh, elemental, notably. This is permanently frozen. So this is an interesting card. You know, 3/8 taunt is pretty huge for 3. Obviously, being permanently frozen does mean that you know, unless you silence this, it's just getting in the way, but it's getting in the way of a lot, right? This is you know, kind of Tar Creeper esque, right? But 3/8 is pretty huge. I am curious to see if, like, you know, you've just a very defensively oriented deck you want to, you know, potentially use this in. Again, the elemental tag is a really big deal. Being able to play a shaman elemental deck that can, you know, leverage this to play like a longer game is pretty interesting. There are lots of decks that, like, you know, want to attack you, even if you, like, you know, even not with minions in the early game, but like Excavate Rogue with their weapon, hand buff Paladin with their weapon. Lots of things that, like, you know, would need to get through this anyway, even if they're not like trying to like go face with small minions in the early game. So I think this is actually a pretty interesting card that I'm curious about experimenting with more of a controlling oriented elemental shaman deck. Next, Caress Cabaret Star. While this is in your hand, play 2 different spell schools to transform. I don't know what this transforms into, so we're gonna look it up. Okay, so what this does is each of the spell schools gives you a an effect. If you play an arcane spell, it will draw 2 cards. If you play a fire spell, it will deal 6 damage to the enemy hero. A frost spell, it will freeze 3 random enemy minions. A nature spell, it gets +2/+2 in taunt. Holy spell heals you for 6. Shadow spell does destroys 2 random enemy minions, and fell spell does 2 damage to all enemy minions. And apparently, no matter what school you cast first, the fell effect of AoEing them will always happen before the shadow effect of destroying 2 random minions, and the shadow effect of destroying 2 random minions will always happen before the freeze effect. So that's kind of cool. That comes from one of the Hearthstone engineers who posted about it on Reddit. So it kind of is always best case scenario for it. So this is like a super Lady Najjar, right? Like Lady Najjar would transform into a thing based on the last thing you played. This, you know, based on the 2 things that you play while it is in your hand, gets a couple of effects. So it's an interesting card. There is sort of a theme of shaman in the set of spell school stuff. Um, so yeah, like there's kind of like build your own card. The Many of them are going to be easier than others, right? Like nature, uh, fire, frost, those are kind of the primary things that Shaman has available to it. A little bit harder to find arcane spells to cast in Shaman. Though there is obviously the Tourist card for Shaman. Let's take a look at that, which is the Demon Hunter Tourist, which obviously gives you more access to things like Fell or Shadow from Demon Hunter. But this is a 3-cost 2/2 Carefree Cookie. After a friendly minion dies, summon a random enemy minion that costs 1 more. Whoa. That's a cool card. This just evolves anything that dies. I was just like, hey, what can you get for spell schools? I hadn't seen this card yet. He just throws them into his pot and comes up with something bigger? Huh. Yeah, that's how they can get the Fell spell. Yeah, Wish Upon a Star I think is the only arcane spell that actually exists. This I think is actually kind of sick. This is a really, really powerful card, right? We'll get back to Cookie. We'll get because I was just like, hey, what do you get? And it's like, oh, it's Fell spell. That's how you get the Fell spell. But yeah, so this I think is interesting because you have to cast the spells, right? So like you likely want to be playing a deck that is playing relatively low cost spells that you are happy to cast to enable this while it is in your hand. You need to be pretty spell dense in order for this to be a card that is going to get the benefit of things. I do feel like nature is like the easiest in Shaman and is the easiest default for this, which is just +2/+2 and taunt. Getting a 7/7 taunt for 5 is pretty powerful. And then if you manage to you have like various utility like fire, which is 6 to the enemy hero is good if you're aiming to be aggressive. Holy, there are obviously ways to generate holy with like the Watcher of the Sun. So yeah, I think this is an interesting utility card. Definitely needs to be a very spell heavy deck to take advantage of it, but is pretty cool. Let's go back to Cookie. So Cookie, the Demon Hunter Tourist. Demon Hunter, we looked at earlier, as far as like what the possible interesting tourist things. Demon Hunter has a bunch of cards that can generate, small charge minions, which can certainly be pretty powerful with Cookie, right? Like if you say you have the sigil or the location that generate charge minions, be able to play those into Cookie and get like a bunch more minions can be pretty interesting. But yeah, like overall, Cookie as like, hey, I play some like battle cry minions that have like a high cost but low stats, and then manage to kill them, whether by rushing them into things or just by whatever. Maybe I can just kill them myself and just like basically evolve all my minions. Does feel pretty sweet. So you have more evolve effects, matching outfits, 4-cost spell, transform minion into a random one that costs 1 more, then summon a copy of it. Definitely, between Cookie and this, some decent ways to sort of scale up from having big minions, rather things like, I'm trying to think of, there's not like doppelgangster type effects, right? Like I'm trying to think of any other similar sort of things. Obviously doppelgangster type effects don't necessarily matter, because you don't have like the big evolve for everything currently. But this I do feel is a little, like 4-cost to evolve is a lot, right? Obviously you get a copy, but if you hit something bad, the evolve into a copy of the bad thing is pretty terrible. So it seems pretty difficult for this outside of like having things that have cost reduction that you can use this on. Would be pretty powerful. Like if there was like the guy who costs less for each minion you have in play that you can use with this. Or like the 3/4 rush guy. Like this with like a sea giant doesn't really work. It just becomes the actually with sea giant it would become 2 copies of the 8/5 reborn rush. Could be pretty cool. But anyway, and this you have Cabaret Headliner. Battlecry, reduce the cost of a spell in each spell school in your hand by 2. So more reason to play like kind of multi-spell school stuff. This is a very powerful effect, right? A 4-cost 3/3 is weak, but reduce cost of a spell at each spell school. Like this lets you reduce, you're only ever going to have, like we said, Wish Upon a Star, arcane spell. You're only ever going to have that as your arcane spell. And this curves right into it, right? You can play this on 4 into Wish Upon a Star on 5. Obviously, though, if you're playing Wish Upon a Star, you want to be playing a very minion dense deck, whereas this one's you be playing a very spell dense deck. So kind of pulling you in different directions. Um, Malted Magma, 2-cost spell, deal 1 damage to all enemies. 3 drinks left. So this is a pretty powerful spell, right? This can be, especially with spell damage, right? Like this with spell damage, 2 cost, 2 to everything. You can scale it by multicasting it too. It would be 6 mana to do 3 damage to all enemies, but again, spell damage alongside this is really, really powerful. It is a fire spell, which does matter. You could potentially get like the first cast of it free with this. I assume, right, that the Cabaret Headliner, if Malted Magma is your only fire spell, I would assume that you only reduce the cost of the first cast of it to 0, and the next ones don't get reduced to 0, because it becomes a new card with the 2 drinks left rather than 3 drinks left. But this is just a very, very powerful card, right? Like 4 cost to do 2 to your opponent's entire board is not by itself super powerful, but the like utility of being able to choose how to split it up, cast it 1 at a time, cast 2, 3 at a time, and the fact that each of them scales with spell damage is really, really, really strong. Next, we have Siren Song. 2-cost spell, get 2 random spells from spell schools you haven't cast this game. So kind of a Discovery of Magic, but it's giving you 2 and they're random. Seems substantially weaker than Discovery of Magic. And you don't have as many things that care about like casting, multiple schools of spells, quite to the same extent as say Mage does with Sif. But yeah. Next we have Natural Talent. Get a random Naga and a random spell. They cost 1 less. There's a lot of bad Naga and a lot of bad spells. Feels pretty difficult for this to be a terribly good card. Meh. Seems very unlikely that's going to be a card that sees meaningful play. Next we have Frosty Decor. 5-cost Frost spell. Summon 2 2/4 elementals with Taunt and Death Rattle. Gain 4 armor. That is a pretty interesting one. This is obviously relatively expensive, right? It's 5 cost, but 2 2/4s and each of them having Death Rattle gain 4 armor is a very, very powerful defensive effect. It is a frost spell. You can potentially be using it with the things that care about spell schools, that care about reducing the cost of things. This is a 3-cost spell. It's insanely good. This can be something you use with Hagatha. Hagatha up until now has had like a pretty small selection of possible spells that you can use alongside it. Whereas this gives you a body that makes more bodies, which can be pretty strong with Hagatha. And lastly, we have Razzle Dazzler. Give him the old Razzle Dazzle. Battlecry, summon a random 5-cost minion. Repeat for each spell school you've cast this game. So obviously this is intended to be a kind of curve capper for spell school style deck. It's fine. Like this is a powerful effect, right? But it's an expensive card, and against a lot of decks, like they're just gonna kill them, right? Like this is one of the issues that I have with cards like this that are like, here is your big payoff for your long game plan that gets wiped out by 1 mass removal spell, right? Like I get that, like, hey, here's your payoff. We make a board. But there's such good AoE in like all the control classes up to and including Reno itself that it is difficult for make a board to be a meaningful payoff at that stage of the game, right? So like I think it's cool, but I find it challenging for that to be that good of a overall strategy when your payoff is this, right? It is, yeah, it's basically Elemental Inspiration, right? Elemental Inspiration needs you to go a little bit further. This one, if you've cast no spells, this is still a 4/4 with a 5-drop attached, and then it goes up from there. Whereas Inspiration is 1 per, so it's the baseline is a lot higher than Elemental Inspiration, but like maybe you're getting more powerful things because they're 5 drops rather than 4/5 with a random ability. You could theoretically get this a board full of Leroy's. You're not going to, but it will certainly make a good YouTube video when you do. But overall, um, Shaman's in. I think this pool of Shaman cards is in a weird space because this is like, again, this is your big payoff, and I like this payoff more than I like a payoff like Sif going this direction, right? Because I think it's more interesting when you have, hey, I'm gonna do a thing and you're gonna react to my thing rather than my thing always kills you. But that said, there's so much good removal in the game right now, in particular, that is challenging for this thing to be worth building up to it because it's so much more easily removed than it is to actually build up to. So, but yeah, I think that I'll definitely experiment with it, but I don't have terribly high hopes for Spell School Shaman being that good simply because ultimately what you're getting from it feels like it is difficult to win the game with. All right. Oops. No, 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 no. Why didn't you go to this? There you go. All right, next up we have Warlock. And card number 1, Party Fiend. 1 cost 1/1. Battlecry, summon 2 1/1 Fell Beasts, deal 3 damage to your hero. There's already quite a bit of support for like self-damage Warlock. It is one of the more powerful decks that is around right now. So having another like way to support that is possibly a pretty powerful effect. Certainly a 3/1/1s is more difficult for a lot of decks to deal with than like a single 3/2/2. It's basically another flame imp, and it's a flame imp that like spreads its stats across multiple bodies, which if there are reasons that we care about that, can be quite powerful. But again, just another cheap way to support Pain Warlock does have the potential just by merit of being able to damage yourself, could potentially be pretty strong. Next, you have Cursed Souvenir. Give a minion +3/+3, and at the start of your turn, deal 3 damage to your hero. This does not really feel so much a Painlock card as just an aggro card. It works very well with the Party Fiend and its Fell Beasts, because even if your opponent kills one of them, you're very likely to have another target for this. You still would probably play some of the other pain cards in a deck that's using this, but it would likely be a deck that is more focused on actually just being aggressive rather than kind of having the mid game board explosion of Molten Giant and things like that you're seeing right now. And more on being an actually like very, very aggressive deck that's just leveraging its life total for pressure. Next, Fearless Flame Juggler. Battlecry, gains stats equal to the damage your hero has taken this turn. We are really leaning into the self-damage. Yeah, I mean, talking about the Felbeast, talking about Flame Imp, talking about, all the various ways there are to self-damage right now. This is the potential to get real big real fast. I don't know that Pain Warlock necessarily needed a ton of help, but these, so far, we're seeing some things that are pretty helpful for exactly that. Again, like, these do lend themselves to be more of a fast-paced self-damage deck rather than a, hey, I'm going to, explode with a bunch of stats at a certain point once I get Molten Giant or whatever down. But yeah, being able to, like, play, like, Flame Imp plus the Fell Beast guy plus this, just get a 7/7, on like turn 4 or whatever, or with like mass production to even get potentially similar, faster, whatever, or with guys that damage you when they attack, so you even do it without mana. A lot of ability to generate a lot of stats very, very quickly by punching yourself in the face. Next up, we have Sacrificial Imp. 3 cost 1/6 death rattle. If it's your turn, summon a 6/6 imp with taunt, which is obviously things that kill your own things. Like I think it's this one. Eat the imp. 2 cost spell, destroy friendly minions, draw 3 cards. Obviously, very much intended to use with Sacrificial Imp. There are, other sorts of ways that you can use, sort of things that eat your own guys, take advantage of the sacrificial imp, or just trade it into your opponent's stuff. So I think it's interesting. There are things that specifically are like, hey, kill this, as opposed to just like you have, you know, you have cheap fodder to sacrifice. But yeah, I do think that, by the way, Eat the Imp does seem like a very powerful card, just overall, right? Like if you're playing a deck that is, say using Party Fiend, you just have a 1/1 body. All right, 2 mana, kill one of them, draw 3 cards. A lot of ways to take advantage of having incidental bodies around, having death rattle bodies around, and just churn through your deck to draw extra cards. Next up, we have Summoner Dark Marrow with Death Knight Tourist. 4 cost 4/4. Your death rattle trigger twice. After you play a death rattle minion, destroy it. I have an idea of what we might want to tourist in when we're playing a death rattle trigger twice card. I don't know, maybe this. Eliza Goreblade. Hey, look, I immediately get both effects by playing my Taurus card into that, and now, boom, all my minions have +2 attack forever. Seems pretty straightforward as to where that might go. And you don't have to worry about the rune requirements because you can only get the one card. But yeah, I mean, this card I think just seems very powerful, right? Like if you there's lots of, obviously you can use it with Sacrificial Imp, you can use it with Nerubian Egg, you can use it with all sorts of things to get additional bodies on the board. Very, there's lots of cheap ways to generate that kind of stuff, and double death rattling those, that seems real strong. This seems like a really, really, really powerful card that there's already pretty obvious, really strong synergies with. Next we have Announce Darkness, which is a hilarious name. It's like, hey, look, it's me. I'm Dark. Replace your hero power and non-Warlock cards with Warlock cards. They cost 1 less. So obviously a play on Renounce Darkness, which replaced your hero power and Warlock cards with cards from another class that cost less. This is, you could just play this and a bunch of neutral cards and reduce the cost of your entire deck and they become Warlock cards. You can only, you can then, Announce Darkness again and boom, do it again. But yeah, this is the meme card, like you're not realistically going to build a deck that's like relying on getting random Warlock cards that cost 1 less to win the game. But it can be a funny meme, and more than anything, I like the fact that it is a meme on a previous meme from Renounce to Announce. Next, we have Party Planner Vona, a 6-cost 4/4 battlecry. If you take an 8 damage of your own card, summon Orobos. I don't know what that is. So let's look it up. Party Planner Vona. We are looking her up. And yeah, so if it's a 6-cost with battlecry, if you take an 8 damage of your turn, summon a 8/8 taunt with death rattle. Give a minion in your hand death rattle. Summon Orobos. That's very easy to do and very powerful. That said, I don't know even though this is really powerful, I'm not even sure that this is like a particular highlight card in those decks. It probably is, because it is still just like you're just getting a ton of stats, right? But like the fact that it even comes back doesn't even seem that huge a deal. It's mostly like, hey, you're just getting a ton of stats up front for, 6 mana. You're getting 12 worth of stats that potentially represents even more. And it's just very easy to take 8 damage in your turns, right? Like the self-damage Warlock, again, was already a really good deck, and there's a bunch more support in this, along with another, like, big payoff card for it in this form. So self-damage Warlock definitely seems like the big winner for Warlock from this set. As you have Health Drink, 3-cost, lifesteal, deal 3 damage to a minion. Pretty inefficient, but obviously, like over the course of a longer game, if you're playing a control deck, this could be a great way to get removal and keep your life up if you're damaging yourself. Probably not the sort of thing you want to play on any of the actual self-damage decks, despite the fact that you are damaging yourself a lot, simply because it's inefficient. You only hit minions. You just have such good uses for your mana otherwise. But this does feel like maybe if you're playing like a controlling Warlock deck, this is a good tool to just have that life gain and removal over the course of a longer game. And lastly, Fellfire Bonfire. 4-cost Fell spell, deal 4 damage to a minion. If it dies, your next Death Rattle minion costs 3 less. Yeah, I mean, we've sort of already seen, a couple of pretty powerful Death Rattle Warlock cards. This one is it's pretty specific, right? 4 damage to do a minion. If it dies, it deals your next Death Rattle minion costs less. Maybe. Like, obviously, there could be some powerful Death Rattles you want to use alongside Summoner Dark Marrow. Be able to play Summoner plus a, like, up to, a 9 in the same turn because it costs 3 less. It's going to end up being 6. Can be very powerful to, like, double Death Rattle, something huge. But this is very situational, right? Like, there has to be a minion that this kills, and then, yes, you can float the reduction, but I feel like naturally a deck with this is going to want to play cheap things, because this effect is only relevant when it's in play, and you want to be able to get the effects of things like, Imp, though obviously being able to, say, cast Fellfire Bonfire on something on turn 4, turn 5, you play Summoner Dark Marrow and a Sacrificial Imp, right? And suddenly you get 2 6/6 taunts. That's pretty powerful. But yeah. Overall, I think. I mean, yeah, you could theoretically, because the Ouroboros does give Death Rattle to a thing in your hand, right? I don't know that card to actually pull up, the card image to pull up, but the Ouroboros gives the Death Rattle Summon Ouroboros to a minion in your hand, so it would work with Fellfire Bonfire and with Summoner Dark Marrow. That said, you're crossing a lot of streams to make, a self-damage deck plus, this plus this. You could theoretically just life tap 4 times, but that seems pretty inefficient over the course of most normal games. But yeah, overall, I think that the Death Rattle stuff is what I'm most interested in. Dark Marrow seems really cool. The Sacrificial Imp seems really cool. I like Eat the Imp in a Death Rattle deck. That also seems really cool. I think the most powerful stuff for Warlock is definitely the self-damage stuff. Self-damage is already in a really good spot, and there's some, Flame Juggler, Party Fiend, and Party Plan of Vona all feel like they give quite a bit of additional possible power to a deck that already has a lot of tools. So I do feel like Warlock is likely to be in a pretty strong place this expansion with a number of viable decks that all of which are looking to have some, pretty strong and exciting stuff that they can do. Okay. Ellie's getting some. Hold on. Ellie's getting some serious digging. Oh, she finished her digging. Ellie, you done digging? Oh. Oh, now she's coughing. Poor girl. You work yourself up digging too much, girl? Okay. Let me get back to the review. Okay. I will get the treats to the pups, but we got to finish the review. Oh, Ellie heard the word treat. Nice hat, thank you. It was given me by Blizzard. It came in a like bundle of stuff that they sent us influencers. Here you go, have a treat, Ellie. Here you go, have a treat, Oko. The perils in paradise are if I fall over. I'm trying to give the pups treat. They do. They know the word treat. All right, and lastly, for classes at least, we have Warrior. Warrior has a food theme this expansion, which is perfect for me. I love food. First up is Food Fight. 3-cost spell. Summon a 0/6 entree for your opponent. When it dies, summon a minion from your deck. So this is pretty interesting, right? Like, you could just play like War Axe on 2, Food Fight, and then hit it again the next turn or whatever. You know, get yourself a giant minion from your deck. This clearly wants, you know, wants you to have minions that either have powerful like passive effects, like a Sarah, powerful death rattles, you know, things that you know, just giant stats. Things like Titans can be really powerful off of this, because you're obviously not getting battle cries because they're you know, coming out into play immediately. You want to be playing a deck that is not playing small minions, so you do have a lot of restrictions. Like, you're not going to be able to play like Armorer in this deck. There are like big things like Beached Whale in the new set, which we'll get to, or just big things in the current set like this Monstrosity, very much food themed, but a 9-cost 6/9. I heard nice. With Taunt, at the end of your turn, summon an elemental with stats equal to this minion's. So this is obviously a very, very powerful thing to cheat to play early on in the game. Makes it very difficult for your opponent to, you know, just answer a single thing. And, you know, just does a lot of work generating a giant body every single turn until it dies. If you do have, say, you know, a way to hand buff this, like, this isn't necessarily just a food fight card, right? This could be a taunt warrior card, a high end thing where you're like, hey, I'm gonna play this, and every turn, you know, we're gonna generate like a gigantic thing with taunt warrior. So I am curious about exploring taunt warrior with this guy as the top end myself. But overall, I think it's more likely to be sort of, you know, a food fight slash other style of card. Next, we have Draconic Delicacy, another very powerful card to sort of get out early in the game. 8-cost 6/6 Rush Elusive, can only take 1 damage at a time. So obviously this is a very, very powerful board control tool, as well as a very powerful tool against decks that are, you know, reliant on damage-based effects to remove it. The fact that it's elusive too is wild, right? It is very difficult for a lot of decks to actually get rid of this. They have to, you know, like Blade Storm it, right? Like they can't target it with anything. They can't kill it with a single big hit of damage. It's just like a massively, massively difficult thing to remove. Obviously, like, still dies to like a Poisonous Ziliax. And, you know, it is pretty expensive, and it's not that big for, you know, the cost, but it is a very powerful tool for, you know, just making your opponent's life miserable trying to get rid of it. Next, we have Char. Very, very sweet hand buff style card. Deal 7 damage to a minion for 4. Give a minion in your hand stats equal to the excess damage. I really like this. There's obviously, you know, we just saw Monstrosity. We're going to have some melted cheese by charring that and making it even bigger. You know, not like an amazing removal effect, right? But the additional stats you get on something, get this on, like, you know, Minotaurin, make a gigantic Minotaurin. That was a card that was very hyped, ended up being kind of disappointing, but overall, like, lots of possibly really strong things to land this on. I'm someone who loves hand buff style effects, and this is a pretty strong one. Next, we have Line Cook, a 3 cost, 2/4 tradable with taunt. When you draw this, get a copy of it. So this is a really interesting card from a taunt druid perspective, or a taunt warrior perspective, right? Like this, just being able to keep trading it and keep getting more of them. And like notably, tradable cards keep effects on them. They keep modifiers, right? Any card that is not tradable, if it is returned to your deck, loses any modifiers that are on it. Line Cook, as a tradable card, keeps the modifiers if it goes back into your deck, right? It is a very important note, because if you are playing like hand buff or like taunt warrior, right? And you buff this with various taunt things, and then you trade it back into your deck and you draw more of them, they keep the buff and the copy keeps the buff. Right? Really important thing to keep in mind as a hand buff connoisseur and as a taunt warrior connoisseur. I love this card. Love it. So I, already saw Monstrosity. Now this guy, I am all in on taunt warrior, let me tell you. Next up, Undercooked Calamari. Incredible name. 4 cost 3/4. Battlecry, destroy an enemy minion with attack less than or equal to this minion's. Another, nice card to possibly hand buff. Could possibly use it with Char, or it can also just be this kills a guy, right? Like less than or equal to. This can just kill like a 3-drop or a 2-drop or whatever when it comes into play. Or if you have buff for it, obviously can get that much stronger. I think just a very solid card, solid tempo tool for like a hand buff style deck. One of the big things about like hand buff type decks, right? And one of the reasons we see like hand buff Paladin being effective right now is that you need the hand buffs that you get on your stuff to make up for the lost tempo with the time you spend buffing, the time and resources, right? And this directly does that, right? This directly eliminates an opposing minion, and takes advantage of the fact that you've hand buffed it. And speaking of hand buff, boom, Cup of Muscle. 1 cost spell, give a minion your hand +2/+1. 3 drinks left. So this is a multi-buff card. And notably, this is a single minion buff card, single card. Unlike a lot of hand buff stuff, which is, X number of minions or all the minions. And this effect, you can play a hand buff deck that is not necessarily like super minion dense if you are not relying so heavily on like, buff all your minions, because those tend to be costed in a particular way, right? Like this can be, you can be playing a deck that is playing, more things like the Calamari, to buff with your Cup of Muscle, and like you don't feel like you're wasting it by using 1-on-1, right? Because you do have that relatively powerful effect to take advantage of it. So perhaps the coolest card in the entire set, the Rye Cleaver. So Rye Cleaver, 7 cost weapon, Battlecry, and Death Rattle. Get a slice of bread. And get 2 to sandwich any minions in between. So the way that this works is that when you Battlecry, you get your sandwich. Or rather, you get your bread. And then you get the next bread, and they make a sandwich. And any minions between those 2 cards in your hand, you can spend 2 and summon them. So it's a very interesting card because like you play it and you swing if you want, right? And then you wait to swing until you've drawn minions to go in between the slice of bread, and then you can summon them with the sandwich. Sandwich Warrior. What happens if you buff the durability? Well, it's a Death Rattle effect, not a swing effect, right? The Battle Cry gives you the first slice of bread. The Death Rattle gives you second slice of bread. So if you play this and your opponent just kills it right away, you just have a sandwich that does nothing, right? Unless you somehow got a minion in between. So So yeah, you can use this with the pack, the standardized pack, and play this, cast the standardized pack, get your sandwich, summon them all. It's hilarious, right? Um, but yeah, it's pretty. This is like kind of hilarious, and this obviously is a sort of card that wants to go in the same deck as Food Fight, because when you're playing big minions, you're playing minions that you want to just summon and put into play. You don't want things with like battle cries because they're just summoning them directly. You certainly don't want an empty sandwich, right? You don't want to be killed right away, but it is a 7-cost weapon that if your opponent vipers it, does nothing, right? So that is a little unfortunate. But it's super funny. I love it. Literally, you just play like Sandwich Warrior will be a deck, and it will be very funny. The fact that Food Fight is and Rye Cleaver, you're just playing Food Warrior. I'm into it. Speaking of Food Warrior, right here, Ham the Hungry. Sometimes you see yourself in a game, and it really makes it feel that much more meaningful. Yeah, here we go. Ham the Hungry. Druid Tourist, Taunt. At the end of your turn, eat a minion in the opponent's deck to get +2/+2. So Druid, the Druid cards that you can potentially tourist in this set. There's obviously ramp spells, right? There's like this Hydration Station as a tourist card for your big deck is kind of exciting. Like there's this, there's New Heights. Having a ramp effect that lets you go to 13 is pretty exciting. There's like this, Discover Taunt. If you want to like guarantee that you can Rye Cleaver and boom, I activate Hiking Trail. I armor, activate Hiking Trail. My Rye Cleaver is going to get me my sandwich. I do think that Hydration Station feels like maybe the most exciting because it's 3 highest cost taunt minions. You get a lot of big taunt minions in like a big Food Warrior deck. That feels like a direction that makes a lot of sense for the tourist. It also could potentially just resummon Ham and eat more of their stuff. So yeah. I think that this is I've seen people say that they think this card is terrible. I think they're crazy. Obviously it's not like an amazing tempo card, but you're eating one of your opponent's minions, which can be very powerful against combo decks. We've obviously seen many combo style decks over time. And if your opponent doesn't kill it, it just keeps going, keeps getting bigger, keeps eating more minions from their deck. It is certainly not a tempo card. This is a horrible tempo card. This is like an anti-combo style card that also has, the additional utility of Druid Taurus, which maybe gives you, again, something that can be a big swing against control or other long game style decks. So yeah. Overall, I like the Warrior cards a lot. I think that the food themed cards, Food Fight and Rye Cleaver, Sandwich Warrior, MVP. But also, I love Taunt Warrior, and Line Cook actually may be the more important one between Line Cook and Monstrosity. But these are just really interesting possible options for it. Oh, I guess I actually did screw up and miss this one before I was talking about all the end of it. All you can eat, draw 3 minions of different minion types. Menagerie Warrior's back at it. Menagerie, there are actually, there were support tools for Menagerie Warrior for a long time. We lost a lot of that with the loss of Amalgam, but there's the new Amalgam, and the new Amalgam that shuffles back into your deck alongside things like Voon, and Roaring Applause and Magnetic cards, and this is like a 3-cost draw 3 minions is really powerful, right? And one of the issues that those decks can have is A, card draw, B, efficiency, and having the Amalgam as one of the things that you can continuously buff with various effects and then keep getting more copies of, and if you play with Voon, keep getting more of them into your deck and everything, does seem like it has some interesting potential to it. So I'm excited to try that as well. So Warrior may be the class in this set of the various tools they have that I am the most excited about, because there's stuff for multiple different sort of new styles of decks, as far as, Sandwich Warrior and now like a revisiting Menagerie Warrior, along with some really powerful cards for Taunt Warrior as well. So a lot of really cool things that I'm excited to play coming in for Warrior in this expansion. Okay. I am gonna take a very quick break and just run to the bathroom, and then we're gonna do neutrals, and then we're done with the review. So don't go anywhere. I will return in just a moment. Back. Okay. Here we go. I have something stuck. There we go. I don't even know what that was. All right. It is time for the final set of cards from the expansion Neutrals. First up, we have Resort Valet, a 4-cost 3/5 power with Battlecry. Discover a card from the newest expansion. This is a neat card because, you know, its obviously effect is going to continue to update over time. Right now, obviously, it is going to be Discover a card from Perils in Paradise. It is at a 4-cost 3/5 with no other abilities. It does not seem like it is likely to be, quite good enough tempo wise or quite high impact enough value wise, considering it, can discover, random neutrals or whatever. But yeah, it is a very, very interesting card. Probably not quite good enough, but can certainly give you a little bit of incremental value or more shots at specific cards in the new set if you have a deck that is looking to, leverage that. I could maybe see this thing playing like a brand deck or something, some sort of battle cry focused deck. Maybe this he's playing like, Shutterblock Shaman or whatever. I was gonna say somehow Shutterblock Warlock, but that's not legal. But yeah, certainly a very cool card. Don't expect it to be an all-star, but maybe see some niche play now and then. Next, I think we know how good this is. Marin the Manager. This is the sort of preview card for the set. Super strong. We've seen it crazy powerful in Druid, very powerful in like Priest, very powerful in Rogue. Just very, very, very powerful card. We've already seen it see a lot of play, and I expect it to continue to do so. Next, we have Weapons Attendant. 6-cost 6/4 pirate. Battlecry. If you control another pirate, equip a random weapon from your deck. Like if there's really expensive weapons, right? Like this could go, go into a deck that's using like the big demon hunter weapon. If like Rye Cleaver weren't, I guess Rye Cleaver doesn't really care too much about this, but I don't think you want this in a deck that's likely to be playing food fight and stuff. It being like an extra way to get like your expensive weapons, your like legendary weapons and stuff could be interesting. But again, like I feel like a Rye Cleaver deck wants to be playing food fight, and this is a terrible hit for food fight. So you probably wouldn't play this or other small pirates in your deck. So yeah, it is I think a card that has like some utility like that could be expanded longer term as there's more like big weapons introduced for more classes. So it's worth keeping an eye on, though I don't know that it's necessarily impactful right now. Next, we have Snoozin' Zookeeper. Battlecry, summon an 8/8 beast for your opponent. It attacks all of their minions. So this is an interesting one, right? Like, it's probably not good enough in constructed. It seems like like an absolute nightmare of a card in arena, right? Like this is a big body that can possibly kill all your opponent's stuff, and like if even if they have something left over, you could probably finish it off pretty easily. But I think in constructed, like you're probably not gonna run into enough situations where this is likely to be a good card, unless there's some way to like take advantage of specifically them having this beast or whatever. There's not like you could like BGH it or something if something goes wrong. I don't know. Does not seem likely to see playing constructed. Next up, we have Sleepy Resident, a 4-cost 3/5 taunt with death rattle. All the minions fall asleep. So what this means is basically the ZZZ that you get when they come into play. They can't attack again. They can't attack until your next turn. It's kind of like freeze. But yeah, I think it's a pretty cool card. Frankly, if it had a minion type, like if this were a pirate, maybe it would be like like interesting and good enough to possibly see play in some sort of deck. But I think that it's probably just going to be relegated to arena card as a result. Next up, we have Package Dealer, a 6-cost 6/7. Great stats for the cost. After you draw a card, 50% chance to draw another. Just based on like no impact when you play it, probably not good enough. By any means. Just if you had like if this was a little bit cheaper, maybe it would be reasonable. But yeah, overall, I think this is a pretty difficult card to really make. Next up, we have Terrible Chef, a 3-cost 2/1 undead battlecry. Summon a 0/2 Nerubian Egg. Death Rattle. Destroy it. Yeah, I mean, if you're playing a Death Rattle deck, more Nerubian Eggs and Nerubian Eggs that can, can just get themselves killed is kind of interesting. I think you'd probably like maybe a deck wants just like enough Nerubian Eggs. They're willing to play this and Nerubian Egg, like especially considering that you don't even necessarily have to have a way to get the Nerubian Egg itself killed because you can just get this killed. So it can sort of be, just like a 3-cost 4/4 in many cases, which obviously it's not quite because you're probably just not kill this and you don't get the 4/4 until the following turn. But this could also maybe be an evolve target because you still keep the Nerubian Egg. I don't know. Probably not quite good enough, but certainly has a little bit of potential in Death Rattle decks. Next we have Sailboat Captain. 3-cost 2/4 battlecry. Give a friendly pirate Wind Fury. Certainly scary, right? Like this, if you get any kind of big pirate, this can do a ton of damage if you have like big buffs for your minions. I can certainly imagine this in like Wild with like Cold Blood being scary. With hand buff on a on like a deckhand can be scary. So definitely lots of possible opportunities for this to just be a powerful effect. I mean, you could even just be playing like a pirate deck, right? There's so many pirates in this set that it's not just like, hey, here's a few. It's like you could just play a deck with like a bunch of like mid-sized pirates that this can just be a powerful effect in, especially with any kind of like hand buffs or actual buffs. So I think this card is actually a card that has like the possibility for some niche play. Next we have Tide Pool Pupil. A 2/1 Naga for 1. Battlecry, if you've cast 3 spells while holding this, discover one of them. Maybe like Naga Mage is back. I don't know. It's not really it being like a 3 spells is a lot of spells to cast, right? Like this definitely wants to go into a deck that is playing a very high density of spells. I could maybe see this being something you're using to get like extra copies of like Light Show, right? Because you want to just get obviously that more copies of that. So yeah, I feel like if you're playing a deck that like really specifically wants a certain spell like Light Show, maybe this has potential, but otherwise it feels like this is just a lot of investment to get like just an extra copy of a spell. Next we have Travel Agent. 2-cost 2/2 battlecry. Discover a location from any class. I mean, this is just like a good enough card. Like like a 2-cost thing that generates value, right? You could maybe get something really impactful. There's also just a lot of kind of trash locations if you're not playing the appropriate stuff. Like getting like a the 1-cost heal location, right? Fan club outside of priest is usually going to be pretty bad. But it is a discover effect. It's not get a random one. So I do think that there's some potential here. Maybe you use this as like just an early value play in like a Highlander deck. Maybe you're just using this as an early value play in like a rogue deck that wants off class cards, right? You could potentially do a few things here that I think are pretty reasonable. I don't think this is like a crazy all-star card, but I could certainly see this finding some amount of niche play. Next we have Baythin Bodybuilder. After a minion is summoned for your opponent during your turn, silence and destroy it. Clearly, we're curving the this into the guy who summons an 8/8, even though that's bad because we want it to attack all their stuff. But no, this is a very powerful tool against like death rattles, right? Like if your opponent is playing like a death rattle deck, maybe this is a way that you're like, hey, I'm gonna clear out all your death rattles, and you're not gonna get more death rattles. It's pretty niche, right? Like I can't imagine that you'd rather play this than just like silence effects on their things that are going to summon minions during your turn. It just feels like it's very, very difficult for this to be sort of like relevant enough to come up. It is a Murloc. Maybe that matters. Maybe you just want like a giant Murloc for some sort of deck, but it does not really feel like it is, that useful. You could use it with like Dirty Rat, right? To just guarantee you kill whatever comes out. But that's 7 mana, and you could probably use that 5 mana to deal with whatever it is they're playing anyway. Next up, we have a Lamplighter. It's 3 costs, 3/2. Battlecry, deal 1 damage, improved each turn in a row you've played an elemental. So I was talking about Elemental Shaman earlier, and Elemental Shaman often just wants to use the legendary to kill the opponent. Scar the catastrophe. You often just want to play all your stuff to eventually find Scar and kill them. This is more of Scar, right? Like if you're playing it, this is actually a real payoff that isn't just a single legendary for really playing elementals every turn. Like the mage payoffs just are not good enough. Shaman payoff as Scar. Maybe this makes mage actually want to bother trying, right? Because this is another like individual payoff that you could play in mage because this is a very powerful effect. But yeah, I feel like this gives the elemental decks, specifically Shaman, because Shaman has another of this effect in Scar, and being able to possibly like discover this guy, randomly generate this guy. There's more incentive to actually try to lean into that because you have multiple tools to possibly like blow your opponent up and end the game. Like double lamplighter, for like 16 or whatever, even just like turn 8, right? Can be really, really powerful. So I think this is actually a card that's really important to the elemental strategies that have largely struggled so far in Standard. Next up, we have Dread Deserter. 6 cost, 6/6 pirate, has charge if this isn't starting your deck. It's just a very weird card, right? Like, obviously, you just want to discover this. You don't put it in your deck. You just want to discover it, which I do think is like an interesting element of Hearthstone. Like the fact that there are cards that generate cards from outside the game does mean that things, even if you kind of never put them in your deck, are potentially relevant to gameplay. This is a particularly weird one because it's like, hey, discover this. Hey. So yeah, you're never putting this in a deck. You're just hoping you discover it from something. Next we have Grifta, Trusted Venda. So yeah, discover an amazing amulet to give to both players. The enemies is a phony version. So the Grifta amulets are a variety of spells that you get a good version, your opponent gets a bad version. So they are, let me see if I can find them real quick. There are quite a few of them. Oh, it did not bring me to the right thing. But basically, you get a good version. You get a good version of the card, and they get a weak version of the card. Oh, actually, is it give one to your opponent at random? This is one of these says random, which isn't correct. That can't be correct. Oh, this is old Grifter. Okay, I was looking at old Grifter. This is new Grifter. I was like, what? Hold on. Okay, I found him. So yeah, Grift's a trusted vendor. 4 cost, 4/5. Battle Cry. Discover an amazing amulet to give to both players. The enemies is a phony version. So you can have things like Amulet of Passions. Take control of an enemy minion until end your turn. Theirs, it has 1 attack this turn. Same effect otherwise. You could get 3 random legendary cards. Theirs is get 3 random legendary cards, then transform them into commons. You could get summon a random 4-cost minion and give it taunt. They get it can't attack. There's deal 6 damage or deal 6 damage to a minion. There's restore 12 health to your hero, then take 6 damage, or just restore 12 health to your hero. There's draw 3 cards, or draw 3 cards, then discard 2 of them. There's reduce the cost of all cards in your hand by 1, or reduce the cost of all cards in your hand by 1 except for spells. So there's, basically a variety of various powerful things that you can get, and you give your opponent something, but theirs is largely a relatively low impact effect. So I think this is just a generally interesting utility card that can go into a lot of different decks. Probably the sort of card that's going to see more play in Control and Reno style decks than anything else. But not like just a hey, this is an auto include, right? It is a discover effect. So you're very, very likely to get something that is relevant, but you're certainly not guaranteed to get any particular effect, so you can't rely on it. Next up, we have XB931 Housekeeper. 2 cost, 2/3 mech. After you use location, gain 3 armor. Obviously, you could use this with location that resets when you gain armor, and boom, gain a bunch of armor. But yeah, this is, I think if you're looking for some survivability in classes that don't otherwise have it, it could be interesting. but otherwise doesn't really seem that powerful to me. Probably not the sort of card you play in a class that can already build up a bunch of armor. But if you're playing a bunch of locations, maybe it's good. Octomasseuse, 4-cost 1/8 Beast Mech, deals octuple damage to minions. Hilarious card. Does not work with Jormunger. Always bigger Jormunger the way people want, because it assigns the damage and then assigns the excess damage to the opponent. It doesn't octuple and then assign the octuple damage to the opponent. But it is a hilarious card. Next we have Seaside Giant. Costs 2 less for each time you've used a location in this game. So this is obviously, possible. Like if you're playing, say, the Discover a Taunt when you gain armor reset, and this guy and the giant, boom, you can quickly get out 8/8s. Is that good? Maybe, but probably not that good, considering, you're playing some mediocre cards to generally invest in it. It just kind of depends on how good getting out quick 8/8s are. Next we have Cryopractor. Battlecry, give a minion +3/+3 and freeze it. Could be powerful with taunt minions. You could use this as a way to combine with things that care about frozen stuff, like in Demon Hunter. Probably not like a constructed card. Next we have Carry On Grub. Battlecry, get a 1-cost suitcase. Pack the top 2 cards of your deck in it. A 4-cost 5/4 beast. This is basically just a 4-cost 5/4 that also has a 1-cost Arcane Intellect attached to it. This is just a powerful card, right? Like, if you're playing a class that struggles with card draw, or if you're playing a deck that just cares about beasts or whatever, this is just I think it's just a good card. I could easily see this seeing play in Hunter, which generally it can struggle with card draw in sort of more proactive decks. It's not amazing, right? Because you're paying 4 for a 5/4. That's not great stat line or anything, but you are getting significant value attached to it and getting a decent body at least. So it's kind of like a 5-mana 5/4 that draws 2 cards, except you can spread the cost out, which makes it even better than that. Next we have Gorgonzormu, 3-cost 3/3 dragon. Yes. Battlecry, get a 2-cost cheese that summons 3 1-cost minions, upgrades every turn. So this is obviously a card that you want to play as quickly as possible, because you want to keep upgrading your cheese and then cheese your opponent out by getting a bunch of giant minions. Just a cool card. I love this. Super, super good. Super fun. Has a relevant minion type. So yeah, Gorgonzormu, I love it, and I expect to play it a lot. I don't even care if it's good. Next we have Overplanner. 3-cost 3/3 with Battlecry. Discover 3 cards in your deck to put on top in that order. Definitely an interesting card for especially combo style decks. I don't know that it's necessarily worth spending the card, but if you are playing this could work with the priest card that makes the top card of your deck cost 1. So you could set it up such that you can play that and then get it at 1 cost. The turn that you want it on curves. Pretty interesting. Next, Concierge. 3-cost 3/4 cards from another class cost 1 less. Could be interesting as a Thief Rogue card, but investing in a 3-cost 3/4 that isn't doing anything else other than giving that discount, rather than just sort of spending that mana playing those cards, might not be worth it. Next, we have Customs Enforcer. Enemy cards that didn't start in their deck cost 2 more for a 2/5 pirate. This is an interesting one. Certainly a powerful effect against, say, Excavate Rogue. If there are thief classes or card generating classes, this is a card that could be an interesting inclusion. Maybe you even have this like an ETC, right? We live in a world where ETC gives us access to cards that maybe tech style cards outside the game, and this is certainly a card that I could see playing in ETC against that sort of deck. AFK, the end of your turn, give all other friendly minions that didn't attack +2/+2. If she buffed herself, I think she'd be maybe good, but you'd have to generate a bunch of stuff. It has the potential to be powerful, right? If you generate a big board and play her in the same turn, you're getting a lot of stats from it, right? But it still just feels like you're asking a lot, right? This feels like a hard card to use. But I mean, again, if you have ways to generate a board of stuff that she can buff, they have to deal with her and the rest of your board of stuff. It could be powerful, but she just seems like she's a bit too weak to me. Next, we have Drink Server. 2-cost 2/2 Murloc Pirate. Death roll, get a random drink. All the drinks seem like they're at least reasonable, right? And this is has multiple relevant minion types and on a 2/2 body. for 2. So this seems like actually a very reasonable card for you know, kind of a value situation in some decks. Could easily see this in an amalgam style deck because you want to get more minion types, and it can give you a little bit of incremental value. Next we have Incendious. 6 cost 2/10 elemental. At the end of your turn, upgrade your explosions, battle cry, shuffle 5 explosion or options in your deck. And they are cast when drawn, deal 1 damage to all enemies. This actually feels like a pretty powerful card, right? Like, it's already a 6 cost 2/10, which is pretty huge. And if your opponent doesn't kill it, you just have these cast when drawn AoEs that just get more and more powerful. So seems pretty strong to me as a as, you know, a card in a lot of different possible decks that want to play any kind of longer game or just care about getting an elemental. Next, Scrapbooking Student. 5 cost 5/5. Battlecry, summon a copy of a friendly location. Meh. I'm not really all that impressed by a lot of the location stuff going on. I could be underestimating it, but, you know, maybe you use this with, like, Prison of Yogg, right? That seems like the best use. Next, we have Beast Whale. 7 cost 420. Nice. Taunt. Battlecry, deal 10 to this. This is obviously a very powerful thing to summon off of, say, a food fight, or off of the sandwich. A way to cheat this into play is really powerful. Or if you have, you know, like passive ways to heal things, like say in Priest, or like resurrect it with the Res Priest card that we talked about and didn't really have much of a use for. All right, next, Bloodsail Recruiter. 2 cost 4/1 pirate with Battlecry Discover Pirate. 1 health is, you know, can be tough to really justify. With 4 power, like attacking into it as a rogue or attacking into it as a demon hunter, you know, it's pretty punishing. And yeah, like the fact that it's giving you a little bit of additional value because it just automatically discovers is actually, you know, pretty decent place to be. Excuse me. Next up we have Hosen Roughhouser. 3 cost 2/4. Whenever for another friendly pirate attacks, give it +1/+1. This feels like it's probably actually at its best in Demon Hunter. We talked a bit about the Demon Hunter payoff stuff for all the 1/1 pirates with charge that you get. And obviously this is a way to make them much, much more powerful, right? Like being able to make them all into 2/2s is, you know, pretty strong. Or if you're just playing like fundamentally a pirate deck, you know, this has potential to be reasonably powerful there as well. If you have a lot of cheap pirates, this can buff. Next up is Wave Pool Thrasher. 4 cost 4/5. Battlecry, give all other minions -1/-1. Death Rattle, give all other minions +1/+1. Hard card to use, right? Like you want this to be, you know, something you play, wipe out your opponent's small things, and then play a board, trade it, and buff you know, and buff your stuff. Seems like this wants to be in a deck with a bunch of small things to take advantage of the Death Rattle, but makes the Battlecry bad. So definitely a challenging card to really build a constructed deck around. Seems like the sort of thing that might be good in an arena. Next we have Mixologist. 3 cost 2/3. Battlecry, craft a custom 1 cost potion. Is this just giving you like a 1 cost like Kazakus potion? It looks like Kazakus, because Kazakus potions were pretty sick. So that's actually possibly an interesting card. I wish it had a minion type, then it might be good. I think that we've kind of gone past the point where we're just getting a 1 cost potion is likely to be good enough, though, as far as power level is concerned. Next, Coconut Cannoneer. After an adjacent minion attacks, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. It's an interesting card with things that are making swarms of stuff, especially if you can position it such a way that you can get, you know, kind of Flame Tongue totem style value out of it. It is a 1/4, so there's, you know, some elements that can make it, you know, hard to kill, but it seems fairly challenging without like just things that are making a bunch of charge minions, like in say Demon Hunter. Bumbling Bellhop is a 3 cost 3/3 taunt undead pirate. Battlecry, if you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, summon a copy of this. Maybe this is a reasonable big spell card. The big spell decks we were looking at would only play like a relatively small number of big spells. Maybe this goes into a like Wish Upon a Star deck, having Wish Upon a Star to possibly, you know, trigger the battle cry as well as wish upon a star to buff it, so you're getting powerful copies. Does seem like it has the potential to be strong. And last, but certainly not least, Adaptive Amalgam. This is one of my favorite cards in the entire set. I really like amalgam type effects, and I really like things that reward you for sort of building towards something. 1 cost 1/2, all minion types, death rattle shuffled in your deck keeps any enhancements. So this keeps buffs from Party Animal, buffs from Magnetic, buffs from, you know, Blessing of Kings, anything. So I think this is a pretty exciting card that can potentially build entirely new archetypes by itself, right? Like you can play this in like Menagerie Warrior I was talking about. This is a card that helps enable a lot of those sort of things. So yeah, like I said, one of the most exciting cards to me in the entire set that I am really looking forward to trying to build stuff around. So certainly something that I expect to see a lot of play, and certainly something that I will be playing a lot of. So that is it. That is the final card of Perils in Paradise. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in this set. I did say in the beginning, I was like a little bit disappointed because I had thought tourists worked in a different way. I totally understand that it is a very challenging effect to balance if you can, pull cards from throughout Hearthstone's card pool. Certainly come broken at some point, I'm sure, if you're pulling cards from different classes. But it does give you some exciting options to try to experiment with things across classes within the set, at least, and certainly a ton of classes that I am looking at playing, ton of decks that I'm looking at experimenting with that I'm certainly very excited about. I will be doing theory crafting on the 17th. So if you're watching live or if you're watching the VOD before then, be sure to check that out. It should be a lot of fun. And then absolutely looking forward to Perils in Paradise launching on the 23rd. I'll be playing a ton starting then. So thank you all very much for watching. Let me know what you are excited about from Perils in Paradise, whether it's individual cards, classes, decks, etc. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye. Okay, I gotta go. As I mentioned, the Olivia and I are doing Dr. Lupo's charity stream. Our block starts right now. I'm actually a couple minutes late, so I gotta go. I will raid over to that stream. I'll be there. We'll be playing Magic Commander. I gotta look up what it's GDX. Do. We're gonna rate it anyway. Bye.
Play. So some commander clown.